Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar series of the Philippine Commission on Women, or the PCW, entitled Fundamentals of Gender Mainstreaming, Review of Policy Imperatives on Gender and Development, and Gender Mainstreaming Concepts. We hope you are healthy and safe. My name is Raymond Maso, Supervising Gender and Development Specialist of the PCW Technical Services and Regional Coordination Division. We are the training arm of PCW. I will be your moderator for this afternoon. This is our second webinar offering for our Gender and Development or GAD capacity building activities. The session is being streamed live via the official PCW Facebook social media account. And we would like to say hello to all our viewers on Facebook. We have about 3.4% executive members who are actually logged in this afternoon, and about 89.9% are members of the technical working group. There are also about 6.7% who didn't indicate their position or position or designation in the GAD focal point system. So about 55% of respondents answered that they were able to attend 1 to 2 trainings. So malaki po yung part ng mga participants natin ngayon. Talagang konti pa lang po yung training sa GAD, and that's why we are holding this activity so that we could actually reach you and provide you with the capacity building activities. And then 6%, more than 5 trainings attended, and then 16% 3 to 5 trainings. We are privileged that there are about 213 government agencies that actually join us this afternoon. Meron po tayong 28 coming from the attached agencies and bureaus, constitutional commissions, about 3, government hospitals, 11, 26 from the government-owned and controlled corporation. We also have a representative from the judiciary, and 2 representatives from the legislative branch, and of course NGAs. We have 28, 22 public schools, and the regional line agencies we have 62, and state universities and colleges 28. So a total of 213 government agencies. And of course, we would like to recognize the members from the private sector who's actually representing the private sector in the regional GAD committee. So before we begin, I would just like to share the following logistical information. First, to avoid the disruption of your participation in the webinar, please ensure that you are connected in at least 5 Mbps bandwidth. You can check your internet speed by typing in your web browser fast.com. So i-type nyo lang po dun sa web browser ninyo fast.com. It will test the speed of your internet, and hopefully 5 Mbps pataas po para hindi po kayo ma-interrupt. So you could actually test that, and then you could type in dito sa atin sa Facebook or dito sa atin sa ating chat box yung inyong internet speed. By the way, reminder lang po, please make use of the chat box rather than the Q&A. Pag yung mga tanong po ninyo, doon po natin ilalagay sa Q&A session after the session discussion. So participants in FB can also input their questions on the link. For those attending the webinar via Zoom, there will be a post-test and evaluation survey in the closing part of the program. A Google survey will be provided in our chat room. So please note that you need to complete at least 80% webinar attendance, so we could actually generate this through the Zoom report. And then you need to pass at least 70% of the post-test post-test. And the activity, you need to submit also the activity and resource person evaluation. And then we will be uh, giving you an email and send to you your ACE certificates within 7 working days. So again, yan po yung eligibility ninyo para mabigyan kayo ng e-certificate. 80% of the webinar time, 70% pre-test, and then submission of your evaluation. That includes activity evaluation and resource person. Uh, to start our program, may we hear a message from our Executive Director, Attorney Christine Rosary Yuson Chavez. Edie Gray.
Fellow public servants, colleagues in government, magandang hapon sa ating lahat. Maayong hapon ninyong tanan. We are very pleased to be back here this afternoon, less than 2 weeks since we launched our first gender development webinar. We had over 300 participants via Zoom platform and over 700 viewers from the PCW Facebook live stream. As of September 7, the first GAD webinar had over 22,000 views on Facebook. We sincerely thank you for patronizing these learning sessions, which show your support in advocating gender and development in public service. Like the rest of public offices, the PCW has also been affected by the pandemic. In fact, since the start of the lockdown in March, we have been looking for ways to innovate given the clamor from PCW for technical assistance on gender mainstreaming through online platform. Indeed, this is a difficult time for all of us, but our work as GAD advocates never really stops. Amidst this crisis, we will keep pursuing the advancement of women's rights and gender equality, and we will do more to be relevant and responsive to the agency's needs for GAD capacity building. This afternoon, I am honored to once again open our second GAD webinar. I commend the technical services and regional coordination team for their tireless efforts in preparing for this GAD webinar series. This is a ladderized program for government agencies in their gender mainstreaming efforts. We started with the foundational concepts last week, which we will continue today. Then learn the basics of gender analysis to GAD planning and budgeting until we are equipped to develop our 6-year GAD agenda. This afternoon, our PCW certified and homegrown experts will discuss the basics of gender mainstreaming as a strategy that ensures the recognition of gender issues and inclusion of a gender perspective in the design and implementation of plans and programs to carry out government mandates. We will also review GAD-related mandates that are imperative and essential to fully understand the history and basis of gender and development approach in the country. These international commitments and national laws and policies continuously shape and influence our practices to help achieve gender equality and women empowerment. Allow me to take this opportunity to reiterate our call to all government institutions to relentlessly pursue our work on GAD, not just for mere compliance, but for truly uplifting and empowering the lives of every woman and man. I wish you once again a very productive afternoon. Please raise your questions and share your thoughts in this interactive session to maximize the presence of our learning providers. Enjoy the learning session and continue to keep safe and help prevent the spread of COVID-19. Good afternoon once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Edie Cray. Like what Edie Cray has mentioned, this webinar is designed to allow the participants to learn the basic GAD concepts and hopefully apply this in your work. To achieve gender equality and women's empowerment, agencies need to know the basics. In our last webinar, we have learned the basic gender-related concepts and how social institutions contribute to the perpetuation of gender issues and biases. We have also learned the difference of sexual orientations, gender identities, gender expressions, and social characteristics, and appreciate the importance of SOGSE in our GAD work and advocacy. For this afternoon's learning session, we will have 2 topics. First, we will review the policy imperatives on GAD, and then we will review the gender mainstreaming concepts. Our speaker for this session is a member of the PCW National GAD Resource Pool Batch 7. He is an assistant professor at the Department of Human and Family Development Studies, College of Human Ecology of the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. He is also the current director of UPLB Gender Center, and as a practicing lawyer, he owns three branches of Peralta Law Offices in Laguna. Nationwide, he was been tapped as an expert and resource person by several departments and agencies of the Philippine government, including local government units and the private sector. As an author, he published the first Filipino reference material for the subject of gender and society in the general education curriculum for tertiary education under the Rex Publishing Company. His other book, entitled The Contemporary World, is also released in the market, while his textbooks entitled Human Rights Education, Criminal Procedure and Court Testimony, and Foundations of Early Childhood Education will be released by 2021. At present, he is a PhD candidate under the Doctor of Development Studies program in UP Los Baños. Let us welcome Attorney Eric Paul D. Peralta.
Thank you for that introduction, Sir Raymond. A pleasant afternoon to my co-panelists, to the participants in this Zoom platform, and also to the viewers in the Facebook Live. I hope and pray that you continue to be safe and healthy in our respective offices. And at the same time, I hope that we keep in mind that this pandemic will not stop us from pursuing this noble advocacy. So to begin with, I have the great opportunity to discuss with you policy imperatives on gender and development, which covers international mandates, national mandates, as well as gender and development-related national plans that we have in the country. For the objectives, at the end of this webinar, it is expected that you will know the GAD international and national mandates and policies to mainstream gender in your respective institution. Also, it is expected that you will learn how these GAD mandates would be aligned to the thrust and priorities of the given or your respective institution. We will have three discussion points. The first one will be talking about various GAD international mandates that are effective up to present and keep on shaping the dimension of GAD in our policies and plans and programs. Also, these international mandates are echoed and reiterated in the national mandates of gender and development that we have. Apart from that, we'll be talking about the national plans that came about based on these international and national mandates. We will have learning exercises throughout this webinar. Watch out for the 8 trivia questions that are dispersed and will be read in the course of this webinar. And for every question, the participant who will provide the first correct answer in this Zoom chat wins a prize. For the FB Live audience or Facebook Live audience, you may answer, but unfortunately, the answers that will be considered for the corresponding prize will be only in Zoom. Take note, what's important is the learning that you will be able to obtain, and the prize is just secondary. So before I proceed with discussing on the mandates on gender and development, we just first revisit what is a policy imperative. A policy imperative is a plan of action adopted or pursued by an individual, government, party, or business. It means that these are the actions to be taken, the procedures to be done in pursuance of a certain objective towards a specific goal. And true enough, the policy imperatives that we have are all angled on the promotion of gender equality and women empowerment. Now, the first international mandate that I will be discussing to you is the Convention on Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, or CEDAW. Now, this CEDAW is deemed to be the International Bill of Rights of Women. For starters, CEDAW was adopted by the UN General Assembly on December 19, 1979. It was formally instituted as a treaty on December 3, 1981. And up at present, this treaty has been ratified by 189 states, including the Philippines. The composition of this treaty, no, is are 30 articles. Trivia question number 1. For the Zoom participants, please type in your answer in the chat box that is provided in this platform. So question, which first ASEAN country ratified the CEDAW on 1981? Again, which first ASEAN country ratified the CEDAW on 1981? Answer? The Philippines. All right? Okay, so many of you answered in the chat, no, but of course, we will be only considering the first one. For the prize, no, free 1 hour legal consultation. It can be a personal one or an institutional one, but via video conference, of course, with yours truly. So to the first one, we will inform you, no, and we will contact you. Will personally contact you after, no, this session. So thank you for your participation. Hopefully, you will stay tuned with the 7 other trivia questions. Now, there has been several treaties, no, that talks about human rights. No? So what distinguishes CEDAW among others? CEDAW, no, is the only international instrument that provided a complete definition of sex-based discrimination. Now, sex-based discrimination, as defined by CEDAW, talks about distinction, exclusion, restriction on the basis of sex, which has an effect of nullifying and impairing recognition, enjoyment, and exercise of various rights of women, including social, cultural, political, and economic rights. So there are a lot of international human rights instruments, but it's only in CEDAW that this definition of sex-based discrimination was expounded on. Now, another distinction of CEDAW is that it took a concrete, no, and three-dimensional view of equality. In fact, the concept or the principle of substantive equality was originally coined in this international instrument, wherein it was stated that the true measure of whether equality has been achieved should be based on the actual conditions of women's lives, no, rather than what the letter of law provides. Third distinction, CEDAW has an effect of binding all state parties in the fulfillment, protection, and respect of women's rights. Why? Of course, if the state parties sign, no, ratify, adopt and ratify this international instrument, it is understood that all laws that they will enact or promulgate should be in accordance with this treaty. And because of that, it has an effect that the states are bound to comply with all the provisions of this international instrument. And the important thing is that gender inequalities are inserted, no, are part of every provision of the 30 articles of CEDAW, and that gender inequalities are acknowledged to be present at all levels and in all spheres of the family, community, and the state. Also, no, aside from the acknowledgement that gender inequalities are existing in various levels, discrimination, is understood or recognized to have been deeply rooted, in all spheres of life, such as cultural, family, and interpersonal relations. So there is no other international instrument or treaty which provides those that I mentioned a while ago. All right. To add to that differences, to summarize, them all, these are the three, key differences of CEDAW from other instruments. First, CEDAW is exclusively devoted to gender equality and in fact served as the basis of the Millennium Development Goals or MDGs. Second, the specifics of women's human rights to equality and the non-discrimination are not only brushed upon, but are spelled out in detail. And lastly, aside from providing the specifics of these important principles, the broad range of actions on how to achieve, on how to protect, no, on how to attain gender equality were also mentioned. All right. So let me just give you a rundown of the salient provisions of CEDAW. Article 1 provides the definition of sex-based discrimination as mentioned. Article 2 provides that gender equality in all state parties should be part of their domestic legislation. And not only that, all discriminatory provisions, should be repealed. All right. And there should be specific laws or provisions against discrimination. Article 3 guarantees, requires the state to guarantee basic human rights and freedoms to women. Article 5 mentions about the measures that should be done by state parties to eliminate prejudices and customs, that are based on the inferiority or superiority of one sex. Article 6 provides a suppression on various issues on trafficking in women, exploitation, as well as prostitution of women. Article 7 provides or guarantees women equality in political and public life, as well as participation, voting in the government, and in the NGOs. Article 8 provides the guarantee that the state must do, to provide women the opportunity to represent internationally the government that they belong in. Article 9 mandates that the state shall provide equal rights with men to acquire or retain their nationality. Article 10 talks about opportunity that should be given equally to female students and male students, as well as equal access to athletics, scholarships, and grants. Article 11 emphasizes on the right to work for women that should not be alienated, waived, transferred, donated to anyone, and cannot be surrendered. All right? Because that is an inalienable right of all human beings, including women. Article 12 provides for the states that should eliminate discrimination for women in healthcare and that access to healthcare services and family planning should be protected. Article 13 talks about equality of women in economic and social life. Article 14 focuses on rural women and their special problems. Article 15 talks about equality of women and men before the law. Article 16 prohibits discrimination against women vis-a-vis marriage and family relations. So those are the salient provisions of CEDAW that must be given attention of, and which spells out the rights, the road to gender equality, as well as the actions to be taken in achieving this objective and goal. All right. Now, as an international treaty and with the states signing this treaty, how is it implemented? Implementation of CEDAW by state parties comes in the form of applying the framework itself, where? In the laws, policies, as well as in planning, through legislation. All right. In other states, this treaty has become part of the law of the land. All right. Or they provide or promulgate or enact laws that are coherent or harmonized with the articles that I mentioned. Another is in their planning, specifically in national planning, in economic planning, in social planning. Gender equality is mainstreamed in the planning itself. Third way is to allocate or reserve resources for GAD-related programs and activities, and of course, to make this mainstreaming and applying the CEDAW framework to function properly. And also, there is this emphasis on cooperation and networking with CSOs, the academe, media, and other organizations. So these are the notable ways on how the state parties are implementing this CEDAW. All right, trivia question number 2. What is the only developed country that has not ratified CEDAW? The answer is USA. All right. So we
Morning,
will check.
Eric.
Yes, Sir Raymond.
By the way, we have already our first winner for the first question. Her name is Miss Kalina Santillan from the Governance Commission for GOCCs or GCG. Congratulations po,
All
Miss
right.
Kalina Santillan.
Ma'am Karina, I would like to personally congratulate you for answering the first question. Please stay for a while later as I will personally contact you to claim your prize. Thank you very much. So napakarami nagpa-participate po sa ating group chat. Thank you for participation. So we will just again look back and check the first participant who answered correctly. And for the prize, again, free 1-hour legal consultation. It can be personal, it can be institutional, via video conference with yours truly. All right, flowing from the concept of CEDAW as an international instrument, we now proceed to the Beijing Platform for Action. Now, I incorporated this quote because for me, this sums up everything that is indicated in this platform for action, to advance the goals of equality, development, and peace for all women, of course, in the interest of all humanity. All right, the Beijing Platform of Action has been tagged as the most progressive blueprint ever for advancing women's rights. So a blueprint is some sort of a plan or a pathway, with the goal of achieving or advancing, promoting, championing women's rights. So again, for starters, date of adoption was September 15, 1995. At present, the countries that have adopted this platform for action is already 189. And importantly, this platform for action has identified 12 critical areas of concern. Now, the 12 critical areas of the Beijing Platform for Action are as follows: women and poverty, women and education and training, women and health, violence against women, women in armed conflict, women and the economy, women in power and decision making, institutional mechanisms, human rights of women, women and media, women in the environment, and the girl child. Now, of course, these critical areas of action are identified in this platform for action, as well as the strategic objectives on how to attain or address these critical issues. Now, one key importance of the Beijing Platform for Action is this: gender mainstreaming was explicitly endorsed as a strategy. All right? Strategy on ensuring that the gender perspective is reflected in policies, programs, activities, and projects at the national, regional, and international levels of the countries that adopted this platform for action. So the understanding is that if gender mainstreaming is utilized as a strategy before any decision will be made, before any analysis will be made, the effects of women and men are taken into consideration. Of course, towards inclusive policies and inclusive programs and activities. Now, as I mentioned a while ago, the critical areas of concerns, apart from them being mentioned, the pathway in achieving the same are also identified. For example, women and poverty. Here, there are four strategic objectives, which talks about adopting and maintaining macroeconomic policies and strategies, revision of laws and practices, ensuring access of women to economic resources, ensuring women's access to savings and credit mechanisms and institutions, developing gender-based methodology and conduct of researches, and addressing issues on feminization of poverty. Second critical area of concern is on women in education and training. Here, there are identified 6 critical areas of action, which to achieve which are as follows: equal access to education, addressing illiteracy, improvement of women's access to vocational and higher education, elimination of non-discriminatory education, providing for sufficient resources, reforming the education system, and promoting lifelong education not only for women, but even for girls. I would just like to note that the Philippines, as a state party that adopted this Beijing Platform for Action, has reached or has achieved significant milestones. Way back, of course, tracking back in 2017, 2018, the enrollment of females, or more females are enrolled in tertiary education as compared to males. Apart from that, the TVET, or the technical vocational education, there are more female TVET graduates than male in 2017. So the Philippines has been compliant, has been in compliance, with this platform for action, and it shows with the kind of accomplishments that has been achieved by the country. Now, another critical area of concern is on women and health. In women and health, there are 5 strategic objectives that focuses first on accessing the needs of women throughout their life cycle, prevention programs and promotion of women's health, gender-sensitive initiatives that addresses reproductive health concerns or reproductive health issues, dissemination and promotion, or providing information on women's health, and to provide for resources or increase resources in monitoring and following up for women's health. Again, in the Philippines, the Philippines has achieved a lot in this critical area of concern. Sexual relations involving married women, the data will show that 87% can say no, and 75% can ask their husband to use a condom. 54.3% are using contraception. So it shows that women, at least now, is aware that these particular areas are, or for example, in unconsensual sex, they can say no, and they can ask. It's a crucial step, in being aware and also being empowered. Now, when we talk about teenage pregnancy, that is being also addressed by this specific critical area of concern here. 9% of girls aged 15 to 19 years old have begun childbearing, and childbearing is rapidly with age. Rural teens start childbearing slightly earlier than urban areas. So these concerns have been addressed by the country as a state party that acknowledged or adopted the Beijing Platform for Action. Now, for the next critical area of concern is on violence against women. Here, there are 3 objectives focusing on the measures to prevent and eliminate, or to not only measures to prevent and eliminate, but also to study and research about the causes and the consequences of violence and gender-based violence against women, to eliminate or eradicate trafficking, exploitation, and also assisting victims of violence due to this prostitution and trafficking. Now, the Philippines has, again, provided achievements in this area of concern. There is a sustained public awareness on violence against women cases. Support measures has been in place for victims of abuses, exploitation, not only in the national government, but also in the academe, in the private sector, and other civil society. Also, if you will remember, the SOGI Equality Bill has now been or This bill has been passed at the House of Representatives, but is yet to be pending at the Senate. So it shows that it starts to be to form part of the land in consonance with what this Beijing Platform for Action states and what the country must follow and comply with. Now, in women in armed conflict, the Beijing Platform for Action named 6 strategic objectives, which focuses on the participation of women or addressing the needs of women in situations of armed conflicts and even under foreign occupation, the reduction of expenditures focusing on armed conflict, the reduction of incidents of human rights abuses, also highlighting contribution of women in fostering a culture of peace, protection of refugee women, displaced women, and other internally displaced women, and also assisting women under colonies and other non-self-governing territories. For the Philippines, there is this plan of action on women, peace, and security by NAPWPS or NAPWPS, which focuses on 4 dimensions or 4 areas of concern: protection and prevention, promotion and mainstreaming, capacity development and monitoring, and lastly, empowerment and participation. This can be deemed as one of the milestones of the country in compliance with the Beijing Platform for Action, particularly in women and armed conflict. Now, for women and the economy, the Beijing Platform for Action provided for 6 strategic objectives, which focuses on the promotion of women's economic rights and independence, access of women or equal access of women to resources, market, employment, and trade, business services, training, and access of women to information technology, enhancement of the networks or economic and capacity networks of women, the elimination of segregation of all forms of employment and eradication of all forms of employment discrimination, and to provide harmonization of working women and their corresponding family responsibilities. Now, the Philippines again will show that more female OFWs have been, or there are more female OFWs than male OFWs in the last 5 years, covering the years of 2014 to 2017. Also, women have been women have been entering retail and wholesale trade and businesses, and these services or fields of business remain to be the major industries where women are most employed. So it goes to show that here in our country, we are complying with addressing this critical area of concern, and the results will show that we are reaching somewhere and we are moving forward towards achieving Beijing Platform or achieving the goals of the Beijing Platform for Action. Now, in women and power and decision making, there are 2 strategic objectives. All right, this focuses on the equal access of women to and participation to power structures and decision making, as well in their capacity to participate in leadership and decision making. Nowadays, as of August 31, 2017, the inventory of government human resources will show that in the first level and second level employees, that totaling 976,798 are women, or roughly 62%. In women in business, in 2018 to 2019, the top 3 roles of positions occupied by women are Human Resource Director, 75%, Chief Financing Officer, 66%, and Chief Operating Officer for 53%. So the proportion of women in senior management has been relatively high. Now, for the area of concern of institutional mechanisms, there are 3 important strategic objectives, focusing on the national machineries and government bodies that are inclined or that should protect or should promote or enable us to achieve the goals and objectives of Beijing Platform for Action. Gender perspectives should be integrated in legislation, public policies, programs, and projects, and the importance of gender disaggregated data information was highlighted that should be generated for planning as well as for evaluation. For the human area of human rights of women, there are three strategic objectives which highlights the importance of promotion and protecting human rights of women through the full implementation of all human rights instruments. Talking about specifically the CEDAW that time, all right? And another objective focuses on the ensuring the equality and non-discrimination under the law and practice and achieving legal literacy or awareness of their rights and the laws that govern them, that laws that protect them, and the laws that prohibit the acts against women. The next critical area of concern is about women and media. So here, the objective is really to increase the participation access of women to expression and decision making with the utilization of new technologies of communication. And of course, the promotion of a balanced and non-stereotype portrayal of women in the media. Next talks about women and environment, wherein women or the state parties should tap or actively make women be involved in environmental decision making at all levels. No? So there are various environmental issues on which women can actively participate and contribute. Also, gender concerns and perspectives, specifically in policies and programs for sustainable development, should be the gender dimension or gender aspect should be part and parcel of these policies and programs. Also, the mechanisms at the international, regional, international levels should be strengthened so that the impact of these policies on women will be properly assessed. Last strategic area, critical area of concern of Beijing Platform of Action talks about the girl child. So the strategic objectives and actions that are mandated for by the Beijing Platform for Action talks about elimination of discrimination in the culture and practices, promoting the rights of the girl children and making her aware of our needs and potential, discrimination in education, training, skills development, elimination of discrimination of girls in health, nutrition, elimination of exploitation in the economy and the economic exploitation of child labor, uh, elimination of violence against girl child, or making her aware of her right to participate in social, economic, and political life as well as strengthening the role in enhancing or promoting the status of the girl child, tapping the family into the context. So those uh, critical areas of action are the ones identified by the Beijing Platform of Action that should be addressed and will be addressed only by performing or utilizing the objectives as a pathway for its accomplishment. Now, this Beijing Platform for Action was adopted in 1995. So it is actually, or several years have passed since it was adopted. So right now, no, the next chapter is Beijing plus 25, and they call it generation equality. So they have been several international fora which assess the accomplishments or what needs to be done henceforth from the enactment or for the adoption from the adoption of the Beijing Platform for Action. And in fact, for 2020 to 2025, they have identified 6 key priorities. Now, first talks about quality education, lifelong learning, and training for women and girls. So somehow it captures selected critical areas of concern that were first in place in the Beijing Platform for Action. Quality healthcare that should be given access to them, that is also should be affordable. Rights to work and rights at work. So this talks about equality for employment for all and also the protection against discrimination of working women, may it be sexual harassment, may it be inequality of pay or unfair treatment or whatsoever. Number 4 talks about the elimination of violence against women and of girls. No? Number 5 talks about approaches that should be gender responsive in emergency situation. And lastly, talks about the role, no? The important role of women in participating to ensure the goal of environmental sustainability. So these are the top priorities that, of course, arose from the important international mandate of Beijing Platform for Action, which should be given focus or attention of by the state parties who adopted this specific international mandate. All right. Trivia question number 3. During the World Conference on Women in 1995, wherein this platform for action was adopted, who gave this famous line? Human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights. All right, so I can see that many of you already provided the correct answer. No? So allow us to check who gave the first one. The answer is, it can be Hillary Rodham Clinton or Hillary R. Clinton. So make sure that you indicate the middle name or middle initials. That's so that we will be ensured that we're talking about the same person. All
Attorney
right.
Eric,
Yes, Sir Raymond.
sana yung natin dito, we will be strict dapat tama yung spelling ng pangalan.
Yes
So
po.
yung isang single, yung iba single L lang or ano. So ano po ba? Dapat meron po bang initial, middle initial, or Hillary
Uh,
Clinton will be okay?
Sir Raymond, it can be any of these two appearing on the screen, no? It can be
Okay
Hillary
po.
Rodham Clinton or Hillary R. Clinton, just so we're sure that we're referring to the same and very important female personality. Thank you very much, Sir Raymond.
Alright, thank you. Meron din po pala tayong winner kanina sa second question.
Okay?
We would like to congratulate from the National Economic Development Authority Region 1, si
Okay.
Mr. Richard Mel Capilis. Siya
All
po yung
right,
ating
Kabsat,
winner.
congratulations. No, I will personally contact you after this session. Maraming salamat po sa pag-participate.
Thank you.
All right. So, are you excited for the prize? The prize for this third trivia question is not only 1 hour legal consultation, but a free 2-hour legal consultation. It can be personal, it can be institutional, but of course via video conference and with yours truly. So we can talk about a lot of things with this given 2-hour period. I assure you. All right. Okay. So flowing from the CEDAW and the Beijing Platform for Action, it is worth to
Attorney Eric,
mention.
before we
Yes, sir.
go, before you
Right.
continue please, konting commercial lang po tayo.
Yes, please,
Can
sir.
I
Go ahead
request
po.
you to stop sharing for a while?
Okay.
All right. Pansamantala po nating puputulin ang ating programa upang makiisa sa nationwide simultaneous earthquake drill online ceremonial pressing of button ng National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, Office for Civil Defense. Tech team. So lagi po nating aalalahanin na mag-duck, cover, and hold. At ngayon po ay malawakang isinasagawa yung online ceremonial pressing of button. Thank you, tech team. Ayan. So before I send again pass over the mic to our colleague, Attorney Eric, ayan, dapat para tayong mga Boy Scout at Girl Scouts, laging handa. At sa paghahanda sa mga sakuna, dapat rin nating matugunan ang gender issue sa panahon ng kalamidad at iba pang emergencies. Kayo, na-identify nyo na ba ang mga gender issue sa sektor nyo, sa mga agencies nyo? Dapat yan yung nilalagay natin sa ating mga GAD plans and budgets and sa ating mga budget proposals. At kung paano gawin yan, inaanyayahan ko kayo sa susunod nating webinar series next September 29 para alamin yung paano yung mga gender analysis or gender issues. Magsisimula po tayo ng registration sa September 21, 2 p.m. Kasi marami po sa inyong nagkakaroon po ng problema. Minsan gumigising po ng madaling araw para lang po mag-register pero napupuno po yung ating registration. Again, humihingi po kami ng pasensya sa inyo at pangunawa. So kaya po kami, sabay-sabay po tayo, mag-open po kami ng registration September 21, 2 p.m. sa ating website. So dyan po, nakikisaw po ulit ang PCW sa National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, Office for Civil Defense, sa online ceremonial pressing of button. Attorney Eric?
Yes, Sir Raymond. All right, maybe may I be allowed to proceed? Okay. So flowing from our knowledge or flowing from the mandates that I mentioned a while ago, it is worthy to mention the importance of the succeeding goals that were set, no? Coming from these mandates, no? Particularly the Millennium Development Goals or MDGs and the Sustainable Development Goals or SDGs. No? So in comparison, all right. So in comparison, the Millennium Development Goals are only 8, right? And Sustainable Development Goals are 17. But take note, the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals have both have a specific goal on gender equality. In the Millennium Development Goals, it was named or it was tagged as promotion of gender equality and empowerment of women. And in number 5 of the SDGs, it focuses on gender equality. For starters, it is proper to give a juxtaposition, no, of these two goals. No, MDGs has 8 goals, SDGs have 17. The targets of MDGs are 18, SDGs target are 169. Of course, the indicators of MDGs are 48 and 230 for SDGs. The MDGs only cover developing countries. However, SDGs cover all countries. The timeline is very much different because the MDGs timeline covered the years of 2000 to 2015. And for the SDGs, it covered 2016 to 2030. The MDGs also focused exclusively on poverty reduction, but the SDGs focused more on global development with and for sustainability. All right. In the MDGs, focusing on number 3 of to promote gender equality and empowerment, it should be understood that it only has a single target. The single target talks about to eliminate gender disparity in primary and secondary education by 2005 and in all levels of education by 2015. So similarly with the Beijing Platform for Action, this target is the one needed for this goal to be achieved. All right. So when the MDGs were adopted or were set, no, this was the single target that should be utilized to be able to achieve this specific MDG. With the SDGs, or with the SDGs on the gender equality goal, or number 5, or in achieving or empowering all women and girls, it has 9 targets. Target 5.1 talks about ending discrimination against women and girls. Target 5.2 talks about ending violence against and exploitation of women and girls. Target number 3 talks about the elimination of forced marriages and genital mutilation. Target 5.4 talks about to value unpaid care and promote shared domestic responsibilities. Target 5-5 talks about ensuring full participation in leadership and decision making. Target 5-6 talks about the importance of universal access to reproductive health and rights. Target 5-8 talks about equal rights to economic resources, property ownership, and financial services. Target 5-B talks about the promotion of empowerment through technology. And the last target, Target 5-C, talks about policies that should be strengthened and should be adopted and should be enforced in legislation to achieve gender equality. So again, these targets are the one or the roadmap or the pathway towards achieving this specific sustainable development goal. Now, the beauty of the SDGs in relation to gender equality is that the goal of gender equality has been acknowledged as part and parcel of all other development goals. Because in reality, the gender dimension of every of these mentioned goals are or should be given importance. And it should be highlighted that to be able to achieve the goals of no poverty, zero hunger, quality education, gender concerns must also be addressed. So in effect, no, to be able to achieve these goals, the gender dimension or the issue on gender equality or the goal of gender equality should also be promoted, no, or should be also given importance. All right. Going back, no, to the international mandates that I mentioned, I think it's proper that we somehow provide a distinction among the mandates that were discussed. CEDAW is a treaty, no, that needs ratification, of course. The BPFA, the MDGs and SDGs are resolutions, but it doesn't mean that it is not binding. Of course, upon adoption by the country, it binds them. And it is understanding that the country or the state party who will be adopting these resolutions will comply or will do actions in harmony with these international resolutions. It was adopted, the CEDAW was adopted on December 1979, and there needs to be an institution on December 3, 1981. BPFA was adopted on September 15, 1995. The MDGs were adopted on September 2000. SDGs were adopted on September 2015. CEDAW was ratified by 189 countries. BPFA was adopted by 189 countries. MDGs were adopted by 189 countries. SDGs were adopted by 193 countries. CEDAW consists of 30 articles. BPFA addresses 12 critical areas of concerns that were mentioned, and the MDGs consist of 8 goals. SDGs consist of 17 goals. So hopefully, with this very simple distinction that was provided, you were able to classify which among which, of course, taking into consideration the knowledge and learnings that were discussed previously. Okay, trivia question number 4. In what country were the 17 SDGs, all right, adopted? Again, in what country were the 17 SDGs adopted? Okay. So I now can see your answers. All right. The answer is USA, particularly in New York. All right. During the, ayan. Anyway, the price, no? Okay, congratulations to the one who answered correctly. So this will be the price. Similar to price number 3, a free 2-hour legal consultation. It can be personal, institutional, via video conference with yours truly. All right.
Attorney Eric, meron na
Yes,
po
sir,
tayong
Ramon.
yung sa question number 3, meron po tayong
Okay.
nanalo na. Si Miss Vanessa Nelicel Bartolome from DOST.
All right. Ma'am
Vanessa
Vanessa.
Nelicel Bartolome,
All right.
DOST.
So, Ma'am Vanessa, I would like to acknowledge and congratulate you for answering trivia question number 3. And hopefully, you will still be participating in the rest of the in answering the succeeding trivia questions. All right. So, agad-agad, no? Trivia question number 5. The 2030 Development Agenda, wherein the SDGs were set or were indicated, consists of how many paragraphs? Again, the 2030 Development Agenda, wherein the SDGs were set or were put into place, consists of how many paragraphs? You may answer now. Ayan, para medyo nahirapan sila. Okay. So, hindi ko pa nakikita ang tamang sagot. Muntik na. All right. So, I am compelled to show you the answer. The answer is 92 paragraphs. I already saw one who answered correctly. Okay. So, the price is this one. So if you will see, the prices that were previously given are consultations, but now I am offering a free 1-hour webinar, all right, institutional on any GAD-related topic to be conducted by yours truly. So congratulations to the one who will be given this prize. Okay, so like what we mentioned a while ago, the next discussion point will be on the national mandates. So it's only proper that we start with the Philippine Constitution. Section 14, Article 2 of our Philippine Constitution talks about, or if I may quote, no, the state recognizes the role of women in nation building and shall ensure the fundamental equality before the law of women and men. Now, this provision is very important. Why? Because of course, the Constitution is the supreme and fundamental law of the land. And all laws must be in harmony, no, with the constitutional provisions. And this one is a constitutional provision. So all laws, no, should be harmonized in this specific section. Because otherwise, the law can be deemed as non-constitutional and therefore null and void. So that's how significant this very short constitutional provision highlighting the role of women in nation building, because all laws must be angled towards complying with this specific constitutional provision and good and valid as a national mandate when you talk about policy imperatives on gender and development. True enough, no? The following national mandate is the Women in Development Nation Building Act, which the title itself, no, contains what the constitutional provision talks about, all right, or Republic Act 7192. Now, the Declaration of Policy mentions as follows, no, that in receipt of official development assistance, there shall, or a portion shall be set aside and utilized to fund or to support programs and activities for women. Second, that departments of the government should ensure that women benefit equally and participate directly in these development programs and projects, as well as that their full participation and involvement should be ensured. And lastly, that all regulations of government agencies shall be, or circulars and even issuances and procedures shall be reviewed, revised to remove gender bias therein. So this law is anchored on that constitutional provision, and this remains valid up to date. And being valid up to date, this must still be complied with. another law or another very important law that came about or arose from that specific constitutional provision is the Magna Carta of Women, which has been deemed as the comprehensive women's human rights law that, of course, focuses in the elimination discrimination, no, through protection, recognition, fulfillment of rights of Filipino women, with specific emphasis to those belonging in the marginalized sector. So this Magna Carta of Women is, of course, anchored in that specific provision that I mentioned a while ago. Now, one of the most important provisions in this Magna Carta of Women is this under Section 36 for the chapter institutional mechanisms. Okay, so gender mainstreaming is recognized as a strategy to implement the law. All right, so somehow it gathered the concept of gender mainstreaming as a strategy in the SEDO, and which was reflected now in a national law that is anchored in the constitutional provision, and being a law must be properly complied with. So as mandated for all government agencies, no, there is no exception here. Okay, offices, bureaus, instrumentalities, SUCs in the academe, GOCCs shall pursue the adoption of gender mainstreaming as a strategy in achieving fulfillment and promotion of women's human rights, elimination of gender discrimination in the structures, policies, programs, processes, and procedures. And this is one of the mandates that which resulted to the strategic implementation of gender mainstreaming all over the country. All right. So I just want to show that this Section 36 has sufficient basis nationally and internationally. And again, this is a law, and a law must be followed and must be complied with. All right. The Magna Carta of Women, aside from that specific and very important provision, spells out various rights, no? Talking about the protection from all forms of violence, providing for security in disaster calamities, ensuring participation and representation, equal treatment before the law, equal access and elimination of discrimination of women in education, participation in sports, in employment, avoid elimination of discrimination in employment, specifically in the military, police, no, and other similar services, the elimination of discrimination, no, on women in the media, comprehensive health, leave benefits, and so on and so forth. So somehow, you are already gathering some inputs coming from the international mandates that I discussed previously. All right? Now, some essential features that is worthy to mention to highlight Magna Carta of Women are as follows. No? That the Magna Carta of Women is inclined or promotes the increase of number of women in third-level positions, no, to achieve 50-50 gender balance, and that the women composition in planning, no, in development planning, program implementation shall be at least 40%. Of course, as what I mentioned and what was been enumerated in the previous slide, that these rights, no, or the equal access and elimination of discrimination education on women and children should be provided. All right. Aside from that, those that I mentioned, it's also important again that I mentioned kanina that there is a focus on marginalized women or women belonging in a marginalized society or a marginalized sector, because here the law guarantees. No? So in effect, the state should guarantee that the following should be given: food security and resources for food production, skills training, representation should be also enhanced, access to information, social protection, preservation of cultural identity and integrity, protection of children or girl children against all forms of discrimination, protection of women, senior citizens, all right, participation of women in inclusion in concerns of peace and development, and so on and so forth. All right. I would just like to mention, no, that there is a special leave in Magna Carta of Women, which is also one of the highlights, no, of this very important and notable law. Okay, so flowing from that, one of the essential features is, of course, to eliminate discrimination in employment in the field of military, police, and other services, which also states that there should be similar promotional privileges and opportunities, same to their men counterpart. Next will be about the leave benefits that I mentioned a while ago, which is also provided for in the Magna Carta of Women. Okay, women in media has also given importance here, similar with the PFA that I mentioned kanina, that there should be no discrimination and that there should be no derogatory portrayal of women in media and film. Why? Of course, to raise the consciousness of the public, and that, of course, to recognize the dignity of women and also emphasizing their role and contribution in the family, community, and society through the use of mass media. Also, one essential feature of the Magna Carta of Women is that the status, no, or there should be equal status that will be provided to men as well as to women in the titling of land, no, and issuance of stewardship contracts. Of course, uh, the both men and women should have equal rights to own or property or to be registered owners of a given property, and there should be no discrimination against a woman who would want to be a registered owner of a specific property, of a specific land, and of course in issuance of stewardship contracts and also in land patents. All right. Lastly, no, the one of the essential features of Magna Carta of Women are the following. No, there is a mandate in Magna Carta of Women on planning, budgeting, monitoring, and evaluation for gender and development, the creation and the strengthening of GFPS, the generation, dissemination, and maintenance of gender statistics and sex disaggregated database that should be utilized in planning, programming, and policy formulation. I would just like to state the specific provisions on about the GAD budget. No? At least 5% of the total agency or LGU budget appropriations shall correspond to activities supporting GAD plans and programs. So you may want to check the specific provision on Section 37(1)(c) in the IRR of 9710. So this is the legal basis of the 5% or of the allocation of 5% of the GAD budget for GAD plans and programs. I would just like to follow up that there is also the specific provision that NGAs and LGUs, no, should ensure that 5 to 30% of funds received from foreign governments and other multilateral agencies should be in support of gender responsive programs and projects. So this percentage and mandated allocation is also located or can be found in Section 37(2), the IRR of RA 9710. So diyan po yung basihan, no, ng itong mga porsyentong ito na nagagamit po natin for GAD-related programs and projects. So I just like to end this mandate on Magna Carta of Women with this material. No? So why Magna Carta of Women and not for or on women? Okay? No? Hindi po yan simpleng semantics. No? There is a huge effect, specifically in the letter of the law here. No? Magna Carta for Women, there is an implication that others crafted the law and that women are mere recipients thereof. Okay? If we utilize for women. All right? Pag Magna Carta on women, the designation of women has been delimited as merely the subject matter of the law. And in fact, hindi naman po ganon. Because the Magna Carta of Women, no, that is one of the accomplishments, no, of women, specifically in the field of law, really talks about that women have a stake in the law and that they possess and own it. So you see the various definitions that a simple word can do and which must be taken into consideration to properly put matters into place. All right? So okay, take note of that, no? Magna Carta of Women po 'yan. All right. There are various circulars which were also promulgated on GAD planning and budgeting, JMC 2012-01 for NGAs, SUCs, GOCCs, and other instrumentalities, JMC 2013-01 for LGUs, JMC 2016-01, which serve as an amendment of the previous JMC 2013-01. So this is where you can see, the policy imperatives on GAD planning and budgeting, which of course must be reviewed by the PCW upon submission thereof by the various line departments and agencies. All right. Just to provide a juxtaposition of the three national mandates that I went over, 1987 Constitution is a supreme law of the land from which all laws must be compliant thereof. Otherwise, the law will be rendered unconstitutional or null and void. RA 7192 and RA 9710 are acts of Congress. JMCs here are circulars which are fall under executive issuances. So the Constitution, being the fundamental of the land, covers every Filipino. The laws that I mentioned, 7192 and 9710, it covers every person or entity residing or sojourn in the Philippines, no? And for JMCs, it covers also the agencies which are part of the MC and which also are the subject matter thereof. But in any case, these three national mandates, national GAD mandates, are all binding as law. So when you talk about binding as law, these are effective and must be complied with. All right, trivia question number 6. When was RA 9710 signed into law? Ang bilis. The answer is August 14, 2009. So we will only consider the correct and the specific date of August 14, 2009. For your prize, a 1-hour free webinar, of course, it is institutional, no, on any GAD-related topic to be conducted by yours truly. So congratulations to the participant who were able to answer correctly.
Thank you, Attorney Eric. Meron po tayo yung nanalo sa question number 4 at saka question number 5.
Okay.
Congratulations po, Miss, I'm not so sure if this is a Mr. or a Miss, Francis Cleopas of the Department of Foreign Affairs. And we have, for question number 5, Sir Aaron Cesar Rante of the Energy Regulatory Commission. Congratulations, Francis and Aaron of DFA and ERC.
All right. I would like to personally congratulate Francis and Aaron for participating and, of course, for winning, no? And for answering correctly and for, of course, for winning the prize. So again, also I would like to congratulate all those who exerted efforts to provide answers, no? Again, this is not really about the prize, but of course, what you will gain, no, from answering these specific trivia questions. All right. So from the international mandates that were, as you can see, no, echoed in the national mandates, GAD-related plans and national plans and guidelines came about. The first one that I would like to give attention to is the Philippine Plan for Gender-Responsive Development, covering 1995 to 2025. Now, why is this important? The PPGD is very important because it laid out development goals and strategies that will make gender equity innate. No, it is as if gender equality will be inherent in the programs and policies of the government. And this is a 30-year perspective plan, which is still effective up to date. And there is, as provided in the plan, women-friendly policies can take root from, aside from taking root from, can be flourished despite the growing barriers, attitudes, and stereotyping. So I would just like to show you the framework that was utilized in framing this plan. No? So if you will see, this plan was anchored on the future trends, strategies, general effects, with focus on the gender effects that wherein strategies arose from, and thereafter the vision. So let me invite you to the gender effects that were taken into attention. No? Here you will see that the positive and negative impacts were taken attention or were taken note of. No? And from there, the strategies are under 4 categories: mainstreaming of God, economic strategies, socio-cultural strategies, and addressing political and legal issues. Now we go to the vision. The vision are as follows of this plan: gender equality and equity, women's empowerment, sustainable development, peace and social justice, actualization of human potentials beyond basic needs, democratic participation, self-determination at all levels, and respect for human rights, specifically the rights to food, shelter, and to a decent life. So from this kind of framing, it is understood that all issues, concerns were taken note of and given attention to, so that the vision, these visions will be able to achieve. Because of course, it's a plan wherein it must be angled towards a specific goal or vision. All right. So somehow, the implementation of this plan were also enumerated. No? As a general policy framework, mainstreaming God should be a collective responsibility. Right? So the concept of God mainstreaming is already here. And it is mentioned or reiterated by the plan that should be a responsibility of everyone. There should be proper networking, and partnership or enhancement of the partnership or networking of government offices and NGOs in collaboration of their GAD efforts. Aside from the general policy framework, specific policies and strategies were named. Again, I would like to reiterate that this is still an effective plan because it will last up to 2025. So we can utilize these strategies in order to comply with the plan, right? So systematization of approaches to integrating GAD concerns, formalization of an action plan on GAD mainstreaming, and making sure that this action plan will be incorporated into the agency implementation plan. Guidelines on GAD institutionalization must be done, and also there should be a lot of GAD strategic planning workshops, and trainings. Apart from those, some strategies that were highlighted in the PPGD are the following. There should be periodic assessment of the then NCRFW and now PCW. GFPS must be established not only in the national level but also in the regional and sub-regional levels. The capability of GFPS must be continuously upgraded. All right, and that the mainstreaming concept of gender and development must be transferred from the GFPS to the agency as a whole. Also, there was this focus on advocacy and training to advance GAD approach and to development. There should be an advancement of conceptual and operational knowledge, expansion of advocacy, IEC efforts, utilization of multimedia, conduct of training and gender sensitivity, and even gender-responsive development planning. Sector-specific training modules should be formulated. GAD concerns should be incorporated in the training modules of the institution so that it will be contextual on the specific agency concerned or specific institution concerned. All right, and of course, GAD objectives should be promoted through the educational and academic institutions for the SUCs and the members of the academe. All right. Another area which was focused on by PPGD in its implementation is this one, resource mobilization. So here, mainstream budgeting for PPGD implementation must be made at all levels. There should be allocation of local and foreign financial resources towards mainstreaming the law or Magna Carta of Women provides, all right? And there should be private sector investment, will be encouraged to participate in gender-responsive programs and projects. Okay, another area that was focused on in implementation of this PPGD is the strengthening or institutionalization of database for advocacy, planning, and monitoring. Here, again, no, the aspects of sex segregated data of it being generated, processed, and utilized for planning and programming was again underscored. There should be a gender-responsive database which should be refined, and there should be mobilization of various agencies in the identification and development of gender-responsive indicators. Of course, to show, to reflect, no, whether the agency was indeed gender-responsive. Okay, so those are the specific objectives and strategies that came about with the PPGD in place and which can still be utilized and be initiated on the respective agencies even to date because it still covers up to 2025. And as you will observe, the plan actually echoes or came from, or most of the principles therein came from the international mandates and also national mandates that were discussed kanina. All right. Second to the last trivia question. What is the executive order signed by President or by then President Fidel V. Ramos that approved and adopted PPG 995 to 2025? So meron pong mga mabilis na nakasagot. Executive Order number 273. So congratulations. So I can see all correct answers, but unfortunately, of course, we can only award one. The prize for this specific trivia question is not only a free 1-hour webinar, but a free 2-hour webinar on any GAD-related topic to be conducted by yours truly. So I just like to congratulate everyone for answering and also thank you for the efforts in still lodging your answers, specifically, especially of course, sa participants in our FB Live.
Wow, thank you for that, Attorney Eric. Yung lucky winner natin on question number 6 ay from the Cagayan Economic Zone. Ang pangalan niya ay si Miss Mary Jane Cometa. Congratulations, Mary Jane.
Congratulations, Ma'am Mary Jane. No? So acknowledge your efforts and you're answering correctly and being at first, no, in answering correctly this specific trivia question. So if I may be allowed to proceed.
Proceed.
The next national plan that I would like to discuss with you is the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Plan from 2019 to 2025, or the GEW plan. In this plan, it consists of various indicators for monitoring and evaluating gender equality and women empowerment in the Philippines. So it includes sectoral and thematic areas of concerns in the country. All right? Then this can be utilized as a reference in formulating the GAD agenda. So as you can see, it somehow coincides yung PPGD specifically in the timeline of its effectivity. So this GEW plan complements the PPGD. So here, the GEW plan covers 4 years of the Philippine Development Plan, which I will discuss later. No, that's also angled in Ambition 2040. And it also covers the remaining years of the PPGD, or the Philippine Plan for Gender Responsive Development. So somehow, this GEW plan is in harmony with the other two national plans that are also effective even at present. Now, this JV plan has this specific strategic framework. And you will see here that the vision, no, in PDP 2017-2022 and the vision in PPGD 1995 to 2025 were taken into consideration in formulating the vision of GW Plan 2019 to 25, which is as follows. By the end of 2025, more women and girls, especially those from poor and marginalized groups, are empowered and enjoy the benefits of social, economic, and human development. They are in high growth areas such as STI and ICT, have higher incomes. Their resilience in the face of disasters is stronger. Gender-based discrimination, violence or GBV, and gender equality in all spheres of life are reduced significantly, if not eliminated. And gender and social norms support a culture that promotes gender equality, diversity, and ending violence against women. So with this vision, the GV plan identified strategic and catalytic actions, no, to achieve this vision, which are as follows: expanded economic opportunities for women, accelerated human capital development through investing in gender equality and women empowerment, significant reduction in GBV, and enhanced perspective of gender in justice, security, and peace, expanded opportunities for women participation, leadership, benefits in disaster relief, disaster resilience, and humanitarian action, expanded opportunities for women's participation, leadership, and benefits from STI, ICT, infrastructure, and energy, enhance women's participation, leadership, and benefits in politics and government service, and transform social norms and culture promoting gender equality and women empowerment. So as you will observe, these 7 strategic actions are arose from the vision, and again will serve as the pathway, no, or the guide enabling agencies, no, to achieve this vision of GV Plan 2019 to 2025. Now, I would just like to somehow show you, no, a picture of a GV plan specifically, of the GV plan specifically on the sector of education. No? In this GV plan, aside from that, what I mentioned a while ago, there are overall strategic outcomes. Okay, so these are the overall strategic outcomes, and I would like to invite your attention to the gender issue statement. So the pathway is clear here because aside from providing for the issue statement, the result is also provided. The indicators to show that the issue has been addressed are provided, the baseline are given, even the targets. And most importantly, the strategy on how to address this specific gender issue were also identified. Moreover, the responsible agencies were also named. So this is one example, no? Gender equality, norm influence, human's choice of higher education field, no? Of study resulting in their low enrollment in STEAM fields. No? The strategy, it is as follows: review existing scholastic programs, review TVET course offerings, enhance partnership, and institutionalization of the integration of gender equality and women empowerment messages. Saan? In IEC materials, in materials in education, in outreach, and other programs. So somehow, the pathway to address that issue, no, towards reaching the strategy and making in reality the vision are already laid down in this specific plan. Another, so here, the issue on continued vulnerability, sexual harassment. No? Here, the strategy should be to fully enforce the law, to implement programs, preventive of gender-based violence, develop IEC, policy notes and guidance that will encourage social norms and behavior, and monitor the functionality of, for example, the CODI, which should be required, no, in all agencies, no, to address gender-based violence, no, in institutions. So the plan shows a very clear pathway on how to go about these things and to address the issue, and of course, with the hope that the vision will be achieved by our institutions. I would just like also to focus on the sector of gender-based violence and justice system. So again, same, no? Same scenario. All of the matters, the issue statement, the outcome statement, the specifics of the indicator, baseline target, strategy, and even the responsible agencies were also named. No, we just like to invite you to the gender issue statement here. Limited awareness of women clients of justice services. So what's the strategy? Of course, massive dissemination, broadcast media, online media of knowledge products about women's rights, gender-based violence laws, programs, and even facilities for women victims. Kasi meron naman po talaga. Ang kailangan lang po ay ipaalam. Alright? Aside from that, campaigns should be undertaken in the national level and even the LGU to promote help-seeking behavior for women victims of violence, primarily through messages that address victim blaming. Primary concern po ito. Which of course, in victim blaming, magreklamo ka, i-blame ka, why will you even complain at all? Di ba? So dapat magigyan po ng attention because this is one, this issue on awareness on the rights, services, and facilities must be given attention to by virtue of these identified strategies. Another, lack of access to justice services. Paano yan? So there should be convergence of local mechanisms. No? NBI and PNP, Women's and Children Index, must be also tapped, no, to participate in these kinds of strategies. And there should be reduction, no, of trial gaps in the justice service, no, para mabilis po, no, ang takbo ng kaso. All right, in the sector of STI, I'm just presenting salient sectors, no, that you will be able to gather a picture on what this GW plan is all about. No? So the issue statement is again the result, the issue statement, the specifics of the outcome, the strategy, and the responsible agencies were named. So the issue here is that the STI and ICT is not sufficiently harnessed in advancing gender equality. So paano yung gagawin? So there should be studies to explore application of advancing STI, eliminate barriers in ICTs, affordability, no? Support the use of ICT as a catalyst of political and social power in women. So ito, mas maganda nga pong gawin itong no? Specifically right now that the use of ICT are being highlighted, are being focused on. So yun, that's how the GUE plan goes about. And if you will assess these three plans, this provides a clear pathway on how to be able to achieve the vision, which vision naman is aligned also with the visions of the other national plans serving as a GAD-related plan and as a mandate, no? As a GAD policy imperative as well. So the last national plan that I will be discussing is about the Philippine Development Plan, 2017 to 2022. So it is the first medium-term plan that is anchored on the 0-10 point socio-economic agenda and of course, geared towards ambition natin 2040, which has the vision of articulating three visions of matatag, maginhawa, at panatag na buhay para sa lahat. So this takes into account the accomplishments of the Philippines, anchored in 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Of course, in that SDGs, no, part po ay gender equality. So here, you will see this graphic that 2014, matatag, maginhawa at panatag na buhay. In 2022, there should be a foundation for inclusive growth, high trust and resilient society in a globally competitive knowledge economy, which is also can be achieved by the three other collective articulations, no? Malasakit or enhancing social fabric, pagbabago, inequality reducing transformation, or patuloy na pag-unlad, increasing the growth potentials. So the pathway to achieve these three are also enumerated in this specific material, no? Which must also be done to be able to achieve the medium-term goal in 2022 and the ultimate goal in 2040, which is again, matatag, maginhawa at panatag na buhay. Now, for your information, this plan consists of 7 parts. No? An introduction, focusing on the pagbabago, matatag, patuloy na pag-unlad. Of course, the important environment upon which these 3 articulated visions can be achieved, the foundations on the goal of sustainable development, and the most important part is how will it be implemented and monitored for sustainability. So for the information, this Philippine Development Plan, no, the concept or the principles of gender inequality and empowerment of all women and girls is actually integrated in 12 of the 20 chapters of this PDP. And also, the gender perspective is reflective in the strategic framework of each PDP chapter. So that the strategies to implement SDGs, there is this concept of gender and development. So the chapters wherein the concept of gender equality and empowerment are integrated are as follows. 5, ensuring people-centered, clean and efficient governance. 6, pursuing swift administration of justice. Promotion of Philippine cultures and values. Expansion of economic opportunities. Accelerating human capital development. Reduction of vulnerability of individuals and families. Building safe and secure communities. Reaching for demographic dividend. And lastly, attaining just and lasting peace. So all of this, the important thing about this one is that, of course, the concept of gender equality and women empowerment are all part or are part of the chapters in the plan, which must be done not only because it is a plan, but of course as mandated for by the national mandates. All right. So the point here is that the angle of the institutions in implementing the plan, there is the concept of gender equality and women empowerment already, and which should be sustained and strengthened further and enhanced towards the goal of gender equality and women empowerment in accordance also to the mandates that I mentioned. All right, last trivia or trivia question number 8. What is the executive order signed by President Duterte adopting Ambition 2040? Ang bilis. The answer is Executive Order number 5. So I would like to congratulate the person who answered correctly and the first one to do so, because you are able, no, to win a prize of a free 2-hour webinar institutional on any GAD-related topic to be conducted by yours truly. So synthesis lang, no? A quick synthesis for
Attorney
everyone.
Eric, we would also like to announce the winner for question number 7 for the trivia 7. Again, taga Region 1 ito, from DOST Region 1, Miss Maureen Heidi Perez. Congratulations po, Miss Maureen Perez.
Okay, Kabsat, congratulations. No? So again, no, just to synthesize what we have discussed this afternoon, as what you can see, no, that really, indeed, policy imperatives on GAD exist. So there are policy imperatives which have a binding effect and which must be complied with. I think that's the tone, no? That's what I would want to leave upon ending this webinar, because non-compliance there of merit liabilities. So I hope by virtue of the mandates that I've shown in the plans, that this must be done, no? And this must be achieved. All right. Okay, because these are mandates, no, of our respective institutions. Also, one synthesis that I can provide, no, in the mandates, national and international mandates that we have discussed or we have talked about, gender mainstreaming really is very much entrenched into the international and national policies, and even is reflected in national plans and agenda. So in other words, gender mainstreaming must be utilized by Philippine institutions as a strategy. Okay? And lastly, that the GAD mandates, no, of our respective institutions should be aligned with these corresponding policy imperatives, may it be an international mandate, may it be a national mandate, and even the national plans. All right? So in ending this session, I would just like to leave one quote from Kofi Annan, the former UN Secretary General, because we are talking about the laws that must be complied with, the mandates must be observed, all right? Because this is there is a higher uh, goal, all right? Gender equality is more than a goal that must be achieved, all right? It's actually a precondition for meeting the challenge of what? Addressing poverty, promoting sustainable development, and building good governance. So, what can be gleaned from this important quote is that gender equality must be achieved towards addressing poverty, achieving sustainable development, and building good governance. And being the foundation of these three, this is a very essential matter that we must achieve, and the mandates that promoting it must be complied with by our institutions. With that, I would like to express my utmost gratitude to everyone who participated in this session, to those who answered in the trivia questions. So maraming salamat po. Rest assured that those prizes will be claimed by you, and I will personally contact you immediately after this session. So maraming salamat po. Keep safe and stay healthy, at patuloy po tayong ipaglaban ang itong advokasya na ito. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you so much for that very informative and interactive lecture, Attorney Eric, during your discussion. I hope nag-enjoy tayo lahat at saka may papremyo, no? So, isa pa lang paengganyo sa atin ito. Um, we have received some question and we were able to answer them already. Thank you also to our co-resource person for providing some answers already kanina. Ah, wala akong so kung may mga tanong kayo, pwede niyo pong i-type in sa question and answer and then we'll be happy to answer it. So ngayon po, meron pong isang tanong from Albert Amor. We have excellent and brilliant international, national, and local laws in protecting our women's rights and pushing gender equality. My question is, do you have laws? Do we have laws defining and establishing who, what is human rights defender?
All right.
Attorney
Thank you
Eric.
for yes. Thank you for that very good question and observation, Sir Albert. No? My answer is we have no specific law to establish and define what or who are human rights defenders because we do not need one. Because of course, human rights are there that should be defended, should be observed, or should be promoted. And there is no necessity to establish or identify the defenders of these human rights because it is understood already that the society gives us human rights which must be observed, promoted, and must be protected by the state and also by other persons. So hindi na po kailangan, no? Ah, hindi na po kailangan ng mag-establish kung sino at kung ano. Okay? Because nga it is understood that every one of us should be defenders of human rights.
All right. Thank you for that. By the way, meron tayong nanalo na sa yung last trivia natin from Neda, Region 1. Wow naman talagang ang bibo naman ng mga Region 1. Siyempre ito yung alaga kong region, no? May personal bias. From Maria Cristina Carino from Neda, RO1. Congratulations po, Miss Maria Cristina Carino at kaway-kaway po sa ating mga taga Region 1 at saka sa mga participating RGADCs. I hope you are learning. So, sige nga, type in sa mga nasa Facebook Live, nasa Facebook po at saka dito sa Zoom. Sige nga, if you learn something, type 1. If you learn more, type 2. Sige. Yan, marami yung 2, marami din more. Yan. I think that will conclude yung question and answer natin for Attorney Eric. Pag meron pa kayong naisip mamaya, we'll ask again Attorney Eric to join our second speaker. So ngayon, let's end our first topic. We hope maraming natutunan tayo. So before we proceed on our next speaker, we would like to pause our program for a 5-minute health break. So maaari po tayong mag-unat-unat, grab your coffee or your merienda, or have our CR break. So we'll have our 5-minute break ngayon. Maraming salamat po.
Women and girls are leaders, change makers, caretakers, and peacekeepers. But while they have an empowered role in our societies, to this day, women and girls are still forced to fight for their rights. How much progress have we achieved, and how much work remains? How can you carry on the fight for equal rights? Women's struggle for equal rights is centuries old. But 1848 marked a watershed moment for women's rights with the Seneca Falls Convention, where women activists publicly petitioned for their civil, social, political, and religious rights. In 1893, New Zealand sent a message to other activists across the world that equal voting rights were achievable through advocacy. Entering the 20th century, women around the world are mobilizing in ever greater numbers to campaign for gender equality, just as women's role in the labor force is rapidly evolving by opening up options beyond caretaking roles. In 1945, the United Nations is formed in response to the destructive toll of 2 world wars, and Eleanor Roosevelt oversees the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. For all the world to hear, she and other advocates underline the place of women's rights within. This sets a foundation for women's rights norms and standards at the international level. In the subsequent decades, just as women are taking historic leadership positions in government, women activists at the grassroots level dovetail with the worldwide momentum by becoming powerful symbols of feminist resistance and social change. This momentum reaches a climax in 1995 when the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action presents a visionary global agenda for women and girls' rights. But in spite of all the progress, as we enter the 21st century, patriarchal stigmas persist and exemplary leaders arise to resist them. With the rise of the digital age, social media emerges as a crucial tool to galvanize populations in the fight against injustice. A single woman's voice is now louder than ever. Grassroots activists trigger social movements online and offline, from cities to villages, inspiring future generations of women and girl leaders. After relentless campaigning, these movements generate changes in policy that signal a true shift in international attitudes and practice towards equal rights. Where are we now? A quarter century after the Beijing Declaration, women and men must mobilize together to overcome the remaining obstacles to gender equality. They must fight for an end to gender-based violence, for access to healthcare, for equal pay, and for equal participation in political life. The ink isn't dry. Be a part of generation equality, and let us continue to write history together.
All right. We hope you are learning and enjoying this webinar. From the policy imperatives and mandates, let us now discuss the fundamental concepts on gender mainstreaming. Our speaker for this afternoon is our very own, our dear friend, Ms. Narlene Santos Millar, the Chief of the Technical Services in the Regional Coordination Division of the PCW. TSRCD is the division in charge of providing technical assistance on GAD to national government agencies and local government units. Prior to being the chief of the TSRCD, she was the chief of the Policy Development and Advocacy Division, PIDAD of the PCW. Ms. Miliar finished her bachelor's degree in public administration from the University of the Philippines, National College of Public Administration and Governance in 1996. So kaya wag kayo mag-compute kung ilang taon na si Niles. She has a Master's of Social Change and Development with distinction from the University of Newcastle, Australia, major in Organizational Management and Leadership. She also completed the academic requirements for the Master in Demography degree from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. She has served as local and international expert resource person on GAD mainstreaming, gender analysis, and GAD planning and budgeting. NARS has led and facilitated the development and updating of various GAD policies, tools, and guidelines. I now give the floor to Ms. Narlene Santos Millar. Nars?
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Ang lakas ng ulan dito sa bahay namin. So I hope na hindi rin matanggal yung internet connection. But I'm so excited for this afternoon session kasi napakaganda nung sinimulan ni Attorney Eric no sa atin this for the past 1.5 hours. So I hope you all picked up what he said about or what he explained about the policy imperatives on gender and development kasi sa susunod na mga sessions dadalhin pa rin natin yan. Ang klaro lang sa sinabi talaga ni Attorney Eric, for me, mayroon tayong klarong mandato at polisiya na inaangkoran ng ginagawa natin sa GAD. So dapat hindi na tayo maliligaw, 'di ba? So yung magsasabi pa diyan, ano ba ang basis ng GAD? Ayan, na-discuss na yan ni Attorney Eric. So dapat wala nang question on that sa ating mga GAD focal point system members, 'di ba? All right. So for this afternoon, ang session ko, I will be speaking about what is gender and development and what is gender and development mainstreaming para mas mabigyan pa kayo ng basic information about GAD no as concept kasi ito yung ano natin building up on what we have been discussing since our first webinar. So I hope I'm clear and you can all hear me. So let's
yes, you're loud and clear, Niles.
Okay, let's start. So this presentation covers two major topics. We'll talk about GAD, gender and development concepts, and of course, overview of gender mainstreaming. There is a specific session about the tool on gender mainstreaming in our next webinar. So we hope that you can still join us in our succeeding sessions. All right, let's go. I would like to acknowledge pala Kim for helping me with this presentation and for being the click person for this session. All right. So to start, let's have an interactive discussion. Everybody, can you please type in the chat box one word for you to define what is development? Just one word. Progress, growth, change, improvement, forward, improvement, equity, access, growth, progress, maraming progress, equity, inclusive, improvement, evolution. Ayan. So, for us, maraming nagsasabi sa atin, it should be holistic, it should be improving, it should be sustainable, progress. So, yan yung definition natin ng development. So, ano ba ang development? Tama po kayo lahat. Because development means merong progress, di ba? From one stage to another. Nagkakaroon ng sustainability sa ginagawa natin. Dapat inclusive siya, so dapat walang naiiwan. Lahat dapat na-develop, no? So in our development, it's really moving from changing from something to a better position, di ba? So yan yung development. So in this definition, we define development as attaining a full and satisfying life for all. Di ba dapat ang development, kung ano yung dapat meron ng isa, meron tayo lahat. No, dapat ang development ay shared responsibility ng lahat. So naniniwala ba kayo na ang development hindi dapat namimili ng age? Type 1, pag naniniwala kayo. Hindi naniniwala ba kayo na ang development hindi namimili ng sex, sexual orientation, religion, ethnicity, or class? Kasi dapat, kahit saang category ka nakabelong, meron kang karapatang umunlad. Diba? Yun yung ating konteksto sa gobyerno. Kaya tayo nandito sa government, diba? We are what are we? We are the duty bearer, no? Sa rights-based approach, tayo ay mga nasa gobyerno, taong gobyerno. We have the duty to make sure that our services contribute to the development of people. Tapos, ayan, sabi nga natin, government, tayo yon has the duty and the mandate and the authority to make sure that development work for everybody, regardless of age, sex, sexual orientation, religion, ethnicity, class, or saan ka mang galing rehiyon, probinsya, or pinanggalingan mo. So, hindi na tayo dapat magde-debate about mandate ha, kasi napakaliwanag nung pagpa-explain sa atin ni Attorney Eric, from international to national to our plans, no? So, lahat tayo contributory dapat, no, dun sa mga GAD mandates na to, or at mga development plans ng ating bansa. Tapos, development, pakibalik, all individuals and entities who benefit from development or are affected by the lack of it. So dapat nakikita din natin na tayong lahat may stake, no? Kasi tayo pwede mag-develop or pwede rin tayong maapektuhan kung yung development interventions ay hindi tayo makikinabang. Then, next slide, please. However, development work which does not take into account the needs, interests, and constraints of the Habo population risk major problem with implementation and sustainability. So, ano ba ang population divide ng Pilipinas? There are men and women in the Philippines, diba? And also we're divided into age category. So, based on latest statistics, hindi naman 50-50 ang babae at lalaki. There are actually more men in the Philippines than women. So parang I think the ratio is about 59 to 41, parang 59% men, 41% women. I don't know the exact specific figure, pero there are slightly more men based on national data. So, but we still consider women as half of the population. So, ibig sabihin, yung mga development work natin, na ginagawa natin sa ating agency, kapag ang mindset natin ay para naman to sa lahat, wala naman tong pinipili, wala namang pagkakaiba, doon tayo magkakaroon ng problema. Kasi sa basic God orientation natin, di ba, sinasabi natin, men and women come from different backgrounds. Diba? Even women have different needs, interests, and challenges. So hindi pwedeng ang development work ay nakabox na para sa lahat, pantay-pantay ang access. Kasi dapat tinitignan natin, mayroon bang pagkakaiba dun sa mga potential beneficiaries or stakeholder ng mga development interventions natin. If we don't recognize that, magkakaroon to ng major risk sa implementation and sustainability, and also in terms of impact. Sige, next. So ito, this is an example of a cartoon na favorite ng mga trainers, no. So these are group of men planning, tapos they're planning about source of water, sabi nila. Women are too busy to discuss about water because women are the ones collecting water. So, di ba, if you are going to develop a program about water, di ba, kung sino ang user, shouldn't you consult them? Shouldn't you involve them in the development of the project? So ito lang yung sinasabi natin, if we don't hear the voices of those that are greatly affected by development interventions, hindi natin ma-incorporate yung concerns nila sa ating mga programa. So, kaya dapat, pag sinabi nating development should be progress for all, sa simula pa lang ng intervention ng development, sa pagde-design pa lang, kasama na dapat sila. Next. Because also, it will not work because by most measure of relative status, okay, different types of statistics, women are substantially disadvantaged compared to men and the gaps are widening. So sometimes siguro hindi masyado sa ibang sektor sa Pilipinas but in other countries it's still a problem. Pero even here in the Philippines, no, kahit sabihin pa nating maganda na yung relative status ng kababaihan because we are now in the gender gap index of the World Economic Forum. The Philippines has been part of the top 10 rank of the countries but now we're number 16. So medyo nalaglag na tayo sa top 10. Meron kasing mga indicators doon and statistics where women's situation are deteriorating, no? So kasama doon yung access to education. Magtataka kayo, access to education. Sabi niyo kasi 'di ba mas marami namang babaeng gumraduate. Pero syempre may issue about anong courses, ano yung kanilang continuity after graduating. There's also an issue about completion rate. Okay? Tapos syempre nutrition, decision making power. Actually sa latest World Economic Forum Gender Gap Index, dito tayo medyo bumaba yung ranking ng Pilipinas, no, yung tungkol doon sa participation in parliament because binemeasure doon how many women ba are in parliament in each country. So sa Philippines, ito yung medyo bumababa tayo, not only in parliament but also in the decision making position or in the third level position. So kapag nawawala na ng member ng cabinet na mga kababaihan or bumababa na yung mga women appointed as USEC, ASECs or director, yan naapektuhan yung ranking natin on that. So kapag substantially disadvantaged pa rin yung isang sector, whether it's women or men or among women, groups of women or types of women within the women, kasi hindi lang naman binary ang pag-analyze natin, hindi lang women versus men, di ba? Hindi tayo tumitingin sa ganon. We look at men and women and then we look at the women's data also and the men's data. Kasi among women, who are the most disadvantaged? Kasi meron din tayong tinatawag na intersectionality of gender issues. So this was discussed during our first webinar. Ano yung intersectionality? Ito yung maraming layers of marginalization or disadvantages. So pwedeng member ka ng IP community, you have you're a person with disability, you're poor, you don't have housing, you're not educated, so you're a victim of violence, you're in an abusive relationship, you don't enjoy your employment, you don't earn an income. So these are the different intersectionalities that can affect one person, not only women but also men. But among women, meron din tayong iba-iba. So we have to recognize na merong ganitong nangyayari sa ating bansa, ano? At ganito ang sitwasyon ng ating mga clients. And of course, because we are pushing for a rights-based approach and human rights, human justice requires that, you know, processes which perpetuate disadvantages has to be changed. Di ba? Kailangan i-challenge natin yung mga institutional practices that, you know, na nandun pa rin yung inequality, na hindi binubuwag yung inequality. So yun ang kailangan natin pag-isipan. Next, please. Tapos, nagkakaroon din ng problema sa development kapag nako-confuse tayo about sex and gender. And that finds its way in our decision making, affecting how we allocate resources, who are assigned roles and responsibilities, what are the transactional processes in our organization, and how do we analyze the problem. Kasi ito dapat lahat tayo, no, malinaw na sa atin yung differences about sex and gender. So if you attended the first webinar or if you have attended basic GAD orientation, this should be clear to you that sex pertains to the biological. Okay, next nga tayo, Kim. It's biological, no? It is permanent, it's fixed. Now, gender, on the other hand, is concerned with how people are differentiated based on perception, roles, and social expectation. So hindi ito yung SOGSC, no? Hindi ito yung sexual orientation and gender identity. Gender is a general term we use to say that these are societal perception about how men and women are. No, these are the expectation, perception, and roles. So gender is very cultural. Okay, sa tingin nyo ba, yung role ng mga kababaihan nung panahon ng Kastila, yun pa rin ba ang role nila ngayon? Sa panahon ng revolution, sa panahon ngayon, or sa panahon nyo, sa panahon ng mga parents nyo, pareho pa ba? So, di ba, gender kasi is contrived, meaning it's really generated by the social expectation. Hindi siya fixed. It's created, no? Tapos ito ay natututuhan. Hindi naman pag pinanganak ang isang bata, ay babae ako, dapat ganito ako, dapat mahinhin ako. Dapat lalaki ako, malakas ako. Kasi ito yung stereotype, di ba? So kapag pinanganak tayo, we are fresh canvas. Okay? Wala tayong perception about ano ba ang babae at lalaki. But as we grow up, as we are brought up by our parents, as we bring up our children, bilang parents na rin tayo, doon natin pinapasok yung gender perception, di ba? So dito, nakukuha natin to, na-learn, na-acquire. So kapag sinabing na-learn, pwede ring ma-unlearn, di ba? That's the beauty about gender, di ba? Hindi siya fixed. Ibig sabihin, kapag tayo ay natutunan na natin yung dapat ibago, dapat baguhin, then we can do something about it to change it. So gender, so ang isa sa mga importante sa gender kasi nagre-result ang gender stereotype na tinatawag natin to gender issues, no? So gender issues, palagi natin tong hindi nako-consider in our development interventions because our mindset is that wala namang pagkakaiba sa epekto ng development intervention sa lalaki o babae at sa kanilang konteksto o pinanggagalingan. Next, please. Alright. So dahil meron tayong tinatawag na gender roles expectations, so isa pang click, Kim. So ito ay nakabox, no? Hindi lamang babae ang nabibiktima ng gender stereotyping, pati at din mga kalalakihan. No? So when we box men and women in certain situation, nako-constrain natin yung kanilang kapasidad na umunlad at maging maunlad. No? Therefore, nahihinder natin yung potential nila to attain full and satisfying life. So dapat ito kinukonsider natin in our development interventions. Okay, so boxing, ano mga example ng pagbabox sa babae at lalaki, di ba? So men and women, ano ba yung mga sample of stereotypes? Men are typically strong, di ba? Men should be strong. They should be the breadwinner. Women should be the caregiver, should be more caring, more maternal. May discussion about maternal instinct last time, no? So, ang mga babae ba hindi pwede maging strong? Yes or no? Ang mga lalaki ba hindi pwedeng maging caring? Diba? So, when we box men and women to certain expectation, roles, and perception, nililimit natin yung sitwasyon nila. So, sa atin, tayo mga God practitioners, tayo mga God focal point, ito yung dapat nating tandaan, na tayo naman ang nagbabox, society ang nagbabox, therefore, we can unbox. Okay, that's why you are in the God work. Diba? When you are in God work, you challenge the status quo, you unbox what is boxing us because of gender roles, expectations, and perceptions. Alright, so dapat malinaw yon kasi if we don't do that, mako-constrain natin yung kakayahan ng babae at lalaki na makipag-participate sa development interventions. Okay, so ibig sabihin, kailangan mag-implement tayo ng mga certain strategies, di ba? So may tinatawag tayong equity, equality principle. So equity, kasama dyan yung, tignan natin sino ba yung kokonti ang opportunity. Di ba? Among this group of women, ano yung kailangan nating ibigay sa kanilang intervention para umangat din sila kasabay ng ibang kababaihan. Sa mga kalalakihan, ganun din. Now, if equal situation naman sa women and men, how do we make sure na pareho sila sabay uunlad? Kasi ang God po, later we will find out that this is really not about women overstepping on the men. Okay, so kaya dapat nga ang mga kalalakihan partner natin dito sa God because men also have gender issues. And men, kapag sila talaga yung alam mo yon, yung advocate for this as partners of women in development, siguro wala tayong masyadong problema. 'Di ba? Kahit sa kataas-taasang level ng ating gobyerno. 'Yun yung gusto natin. Next please. Okay. So, kapag nababox tayo, ang babae at lalaki sa gender roles, perceptions, and stereotypes, ang result nun are gender issues. So, sinasabi natin, gender issues, kapag hindi natin in-address to doon sa development intervention, hindi to mas magiging satisfying life for all. Kasi kapag na left behind natin yung gender issue, therefore blind yung program natin. Kaya nga, dapat ma-address natin siya doon pa lang sa development planning, doon pa lang sa analysis. 'Di ba? Ang development planning cycle, ang start nun, dapat meron muna tayong problem analysis. So, sa problem analysis, doon lalabas ang gender issue. Okay, kaya mag-enroll kayo sa gender analysis session natin next week kasi yun yung pag-uusapan natin doon. But nakita nyo yung pinresent ni Attorney Eric, di ba, yung GEWE plan, yung mga sectoral plans, nakalagay sa first column nun, articulation of gender issues. So, meron na dong mga sample gender issues ang GEWE plan per sector. So, kayo, hindi na rin kayo mahihirapan masyado mag-analyze kasi you just use the GEWE plan and the PPGD as reference. Ando na yung mga list of gender issue per sector. Kailangan lang ibangga nyo sa news yung gender issue na yon sa datos na meron kayo sa inyong agency. Kasi baka gender issue siya sa iba, hindi naman gender issue sa inyo kasi wala naman kayong data to support that. Okay? So hindi rin tayo kopya-kopya lang ng gender issue. Dapat meron ding basis yung pagsasabi natin na gender issue ang isang bagay. Alright. So, klaro na yun. We started our discussion with the definition of what is development. So we said that development is a means to attain satisfying life for all. Therefore, we need to look at the issues that we overlook, and then we linked it with gender. Gender is about societal perceptions and about men and women na kapag hindi natin in-unbox will result to gender issues. All right, so now what is the next slide? Ayan. So sabi natin, dapat itong GAD na to maipasok natin mga development practitioners sa ating gender analysis. Dapat marunong tayong tumingin na may lente ng GAD para yung appropriate intervention tama para dun sa kahihinatnan ng kababaihan at kalalakihan ng client natin. And then of course, the gender and development approach seeks not only to integrate women into development, hindi lang sama niyo yung women, but look into the potential for the potential in development initiative to transform an equal gender relation and empower women. Kaya sa PCW, mapapansin niyo, meron kami laging gender equality and women's empowerment. Parang twin goal siya no? So by empowering women, because we know that based on situation, based on data, based on analysis, most women are still left behind para natin ma-achieve yung gender equality. Kasi ang end goal talaga natin, magkapantay tayong lahat, babae at lalaki, walang naiiwan. But sometimes we need the affirmative action intervention through gender equity, kaya meron pa tayong women's empowerment. Okay, next. Alright, so ano po yung gender and development? Kasi 'di ba, meron tong historical na perspektibo yung with, WAD and GAD, Yung women in development, gender and development, and now we are in women and development, and now we are in gender and development. So yung women in development, early 1970s yan, Esther Boserov study. So inaral niya yung agricultural production in some countries. So doon nakita niya yung role divide sa agriculture about the role of men and women in agricultural production. So parang doon nakita yung nasan ba ang kababaihan sa development intervention? Ano ba yung dapat idagdag sa kanila para makapag-participate sila sa development? So focus lang on improving women as they participate in development. Tapos nagkaroon ng WAD, Women in Development, nagkaroon na ng Gender Division of Labor, tinignan na rin yung ano ba yung mga implements na binibigay ng mga development practitioners para ma-improve ang buhay ng kalalakihan at kababaihan. And then we went into GAD, GAD is looking at the relationship. Kasi sabi, hindi naman talaga uunlad lang kung puro sa women focus lang yung intervention. Dapat we look at how women relate to its environment, especially to the men, Kasi dapat tinitingnan natin ano ba yung issue ng relationship ng women and men under the gender and development approach. So this approach is recognizes that there are different roles, interests, and needs of women and men. So dito mas na-recognize na hindi lamang nasa isang kahon ang intervention para sa kababaihan, meron siyang mas malawak na tinitignan kasi magkakaiba ang interest, roles, needs, So para mas maka-contribute sa development, tinitignan din natin yung relational nila. And then God is about recognizing that yung biases natin or stereotype natin about women and men and about their how they should be how they could be, are going to impede development intervention. Dapat magbago tayo. Let's reflect a change in focus from women and go into the relationship of inequality between between women and men. Kasi 'di ba minsan may ibang development intervention nakafocus sa women, tas pag umunlad na nagte-take over yung partner or yung men. So parang kailangan tignan natin, no, 'di ba? Dapat ka ba mag-take over o dapat mag-joint implementation kayo sa inyong negosyo or whatever program that is. So, merong importanteng aspeto ng relationship between women and men. Okay? So, ano pa? Next. Tapos, kapag na-recognize na natin to, dapat i-address natin to sa every step of development processes, no? From our planning, budgeting, implementation, monitoring, evaluation. Tapos lalong-lalo na tayo sa government kasi we have the resources for that, 'di ba? We have the mandate, we have the resources, we have the not only the financial resources but the human resources to do GAD, no, to implement that. So, sinasabi natin ang GAD hindi lang nasa planning, ha, hindi tayo tumitigil sa pag-submit ng GAD plan. Dapat minomonitor natin 'yan, mini-make sure natin na yung pinlano natin may budget, may implement natin ng tama. So therefore, pagdating sa implementation, dapat tinitignan din natin, yun bang nag-i-implement, may kakayahan bang gumamit ng lente ng GAD? May GAD lens din ba? Kasi sometimes, maganda ang plano pagdating sa implementation, nawawala kasi yung mga in charge of implementing the programs, hindi na orient. Okay, hindi na nagkaroon ng leveling session kung ano yung GAD impact or potential impact ng implementation sa GAD. So therefore, pag binonitor at in-evaluate na yung program, medyo failure siya or hindi niya ma-achieve yung targets niya. So M&E rin, sa monitoring and evaluation, importante rin na meron tayong datos, sexist aggregated data, no? Tsaka mga gender-related indicators. So again, wag po kayong hingi na hingi sa PCW ng shopping list kasi nandiyan na yung shopping list. The JEWE plan, the PPGD already includes the gender issues, the GAD programs, and some indicators. No? So meron pa kaming compendium of GAD indicators ngayon that you can use as reference in identifying GAD-related indicators for specific sectors. So kailangan lang bilang GAD practitioner, bilang GAD focal point, nagbabasa tayo. Diba? Huwag tayong kukuha ng material tapos ilalagay lang natin sa library. Ilalagay lang natin sa ating bookshelf. Dapat babasahin natin yon. So, lahat ng aspeto ng development processes, dapat may gender lens tayo na ipapasok natin ang lente ng GAD para nakikita natin yung potential interventions and impact sa ating mga programa sa women and men. Okay, next. Ano ba yung, sasabi natin ano yung GAD, pero ano naman yung hindi GAD? What GAD is not? Okay? The God is not war of the sexes. Diba? Merong war of the roses eh. God is not war of the sexes. War of the roses is a war in Europe. Hindi to away ng babae versus lalaki. Okay? So dapat po, hindi yung pag may sinabi, oh may pag-God training, oh mga babae na lang ipadala nyo. Okay, wag gano'n ang mindset natin. Kasi importante, yung mga kalalakihan, alam din nila yung God. Diba? Kasi meron din pala silang gender issue. Diba? Akala lang nila, yung GAD, puro na lang pang women kasi PCW yung nag-advocate, Philippine Commission on Women. May nagtatanong pa nga sa amin, ba't walang Philippine Commission on Men? Ano bang sagot doon? Ang Philippine Commission on Women kasi is a response of the government in 1970s for an international call for a national machinery. No, kailangan daw may national machinery to ensure that women, kasi 70s, syempre malakas pa yung issue ng women in development, no? That will take care of the concerns of the marginalized women. Kaya merong PCW, National Commission on the Role of Filipino Women po kami noon. But we were renamed PCW, Philippine Commission on Women, in 2019 sa Magna Carta of Women. Siguro kung kami yung tatanungin kung mag-a-amend ulit ng Magna Carta, baka pwedeng gawin na kaming Philippine Commission on Gender Equality. Okay din po sa amin yun. Kasi para lahat ng aspeto, no, nandoon na. So, klaro po, it's not about fighting with men. No, since because the advocates is the PCW, it doesn't mean that gusto natin mas umangat tayo sa kalalakihan. We want to partner with men. And we want to also acknowledge that men can also have gender issues. But we also want to acknowledge that sometimes, because the men enjoy the status quo, ayaw din nilang gumalaw. Diba? Ayaw nilang magalaw yung status quo. No? But it's not about that. It's not about removing you from your situation, but making sure that women are at par with your situation. Next, what God is not. Oh, it's not anti-male. Okay? We don't say no, pag God pang women lang. No, it's not. It's not about that. So kami nga may advocacy rin kami, 'di ba? When we talk about family planning for example or RPRH law, it's not just about women since women ang nabubuntis, but there's also be that men should also be there kasi 'di ba? Babies cannot be made without the men. So kailangan may responsibility din sila sa family kanilang family planning di ba? Plans no in the family. So but most of the time nagkakaroon ng problem kasi women cannot decide for their body. Kasi parang wala siyang agency sa katawan niya. Parang ownership of women's body is not hers. Bakit kaya? Kasi merong mga perception, may stereotype na yung may karapatan sa'yo, either yung tatay mo, yung asawa mo, or whoever is the male standard. No? But yun yung challenge natin sa God. At sinasabi natin, hindi naman laban ito sa kalalakihan. In fact, it should be a partnership. It should be a joint responsibility of both men and women to pursue gender and development. Next. O ayan, hindi rin naman dapat pinag-aaway, di ba? Hindi siya competition. Mas magaling yung babae, mas magaling yung lalaki. Hindi. While we have indicators and data, we want to see very good data. We want to see very high literacy rate. We want to see very high labor force participation rate. We want to see very high statistics of women running and men running for office and men and women voting. Diba? So we just want them to both enjoy what is supposed to be available for everybody under the law. So hindi po siya pinagko-compete. It's not really a competition. But syempre, yung data natin, tinitignan natin yung sitwasyon for both women and men. Men as and women, no? It's not men versus women. Dapat hindi ganon. It's men and women, not men versus women, because it's not really about who is the best, but how can we make situation better for both women and men. Next po. And what God is telling us is that both men and women are victims of stereotypes. So I've already said this. And when we recognize that, some of your God interventions can also be gender issues related to the male client or the male stakeholders or the male members of your institutions. So hindi komot God puro pang kababaihan lang. No, that should be made clear. But kung ang gender issue lumabas ay sa sektor ng kalalakihan, then that's also a gender issue, and that could also be put in your God plan and budget and in your God agenda. So malinaw po yun pareho po tayo, babae at lalaki, na pwede mabiktima ng gender stereotype. Kasi nga ano ang gender? Gender is learned, it's acquired, it's societal, it's a perception about men and women. So kung perception siya, merong nag-iisip para doon. At merong nagsasabi na i-maintain yung ganong klaseng perception. So tayo po sa God, yun yung kailangan nating aralin. Sino ba yung nagme-maintain ng stereotype? Yun yung dapat nating bigyan ng intervention. So, doon po sa ating first God webinar, meron tayong tinatawag na social institution. Excuse me. Kasama dyan yung family, yung eskwelahan, ang simbahan, ang religion, ang media, ang estado, ang gobyerno, ang pamahalaan. So ang pinakamalaking influencer dyan talaga, I think for me is family. Siyempre eskwelahan, malaki din. And then of course the media. So tayo, kung alam na natin itong ganitong dapat baguhin, personally, no, dapat meron na tayong gawin as God advocates, as God practitioner, as God focal point system member. Kung meron na tayong napag-aralan na dapat pala hindi ganoon, dapat pala baguhin yun, dapat pala i-challenge yun. Simulan natin sa family natin. You know, as simple as assigning roles in the household. 'Di ba ngayon nasa work from home tayo, nasa homeschooling tayo. We have to teach our children how to do household work. Okay, how do you assign it? Okay? Pinapaghugas nyo ba ng pinggan yung mga anak na lalaki? Napapawalis nyo ba sila? Pinapaglinis nyo ba sila ng kwarto nila? Pinatulong nyo ba sila magluto? Okay? So, kasama yon. And then even the toys that we give, sometimes merong may pagka-homophobic din talaga tayo eh, na pag binigyan ng manika, yung batang lalaki, parang may masamang mangyayari. 'Di ba? But if we give dolls to young boys and young girls, they will learn how to be caring. They will learn how to be nurturing. 'Di ba? So, let's be positive about our thoughts also on God. Ay, lakas ng ulan. Next. Next, what is God telling us, no? Hindi natin gustong pagbaliktarin, that role reversal, okay? That men should be like this, women should be like this, no? O sige, babae na nga lang ang magtrabaho, lalaki na lang ang homemaker. Hindi naman ganun, but if a situation calls for it, then there's nothing wrong with that, right? Kasi roles and expectations are changing. So in a context of one family, for example, in one household, kung mag-agree sila, no? Sige, si nanay muna or yung female muna magtatrabaho, yung lalaki yung magsistay sa bahay, there is nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly acceptable. Okay? We're not saying that hindi yun accepted. In fact, if that is an acceptable situation in the family, then we have to respect that. No, but we need to understand relationship. So, nagkakaroon ng problema kasi may mga perception na iba, ay, siya yung hindi siya nagtatrabaho, so yung lalaki, yung babae na yung decision maker. Parang, you know, may mga nakikialam sa buhay ng mga ibang tao, nagkakaroon sila ng judgment, therefore, nagkakaroon din ng problem pagdating na dun sa couple. So, dapat hindi ganon. No? Dapat we are more understanding about relationship. No? If a couple decide na mas yung lalaki ang magsistay sa bahay to take care of the family and yung babae yung mag-work, it's their decision. There's nothing wrong with that. We should not be judging them. Ang problem kasi sa atin, yon, may judgment because nga of certain stereotype that we believe in. But yun yung challenge natin sa God. Next. Okay. But of course, gender issues, God is telling us that gender issues affect women and men differently. And as God practitioner, as God focal point system members, dapat marunong tayo mag-analisa nito. Dapat maggamit tayo ng lente para ma-identify natin how different men and women have, what are the different gender issues affecting women and men. So, for example, meron tayong batas about solo parents, di ba? Solo parents law. So, ang solo parent ba, babae lang? Yes or no? Under our law, sagot nga kayo, ang solo parents ba, babae lang? No, of course. Kasi, pwede kang solo parent kung yung partner mo, either nasa ibang bansa, either naghiwalay kayo, or nakakulong, or namatay, or ikaw ang nag-aalaga sa dependent na children. So, it could be men and women, right? So, if you have solo parent leave in your office, yun ba, pwede ba ang mga kalalakihan mag-solo parent leave? Nai-issuean ba sila ng solo parent ID? Alam ba nila na pwede silang mag-access sa solo parent law? O yan. So, kailangan pinapaliwanag natin ito kasi ang perception natin, parenting. Diba? Pag sinabing parenting, anong naiisip natin? Nag-aalaga. Diba? Nag-aalaga sa anak, nag-aalaga ng household. So, traditionally, sino ang iniisip natin na parent? Babae o lalaki? Pag sinabing parenting, sagot nga kayo sa chat box. Men or women? Alright. So, kapag may perception, kaya perception to, no, or belief, na pag inisip natin parents, or most of us think na pag sinabing parent, babae, akala natin pag sinabing solo parent, babae lang yon. But, sinasabi ng iba sa inyo, it should be both, no? So, pag sinabing parent, could be both men and women. Or it could be men and men, or women and women. Right? Because there could be situation that both parents are of the same sex. Okay? They could be both men being both fathers to the child, or women being both mother and father to the child. So we have to be able to recognize that, no? Na merong ganun. So, therefore, dapat, para masabi natin na gender issue, meron tayong ginagamit na, datos, may lente, may tanong. Okay? Para masabi natin gender issue siya, we need to have gender analysis questions. Okay, we should analyze the data that we have. For example, ibigyan ko kayo ng data. Okay. Hindi to accurate data pero sample. 65% of enrollees in social work courses are women. Okay. What is the differential? 65% of enrollees in social work courses are women. How many are men? If there are 65 women and therefore there are 35% men. Tama. Okay, meron bang differentials? Okay. Siyempre, hindi equal yung enrollment. Hindi naman siguro ina-achieve ng school na maging equal, no? Kung sino lang gusto mag-enroll. But let's just, for the sake of discussion, look into this, no? So, 65% women, 35% men. Ang tanong dyan para mag-analyze, why? Tanongin natin, bakit may 65% na women at saka 35% lang na men? Bakit kaya? Sige nga, type nyo nga sa chat box. Why? Walang tama o maling sagot, ha? Bakit kaya? Yun yung unang gender analysis question. Why are there more women than men? Meron ba kayo naiisip na sagot? Okay, preference. Okay, what else? Could be because of preference, yeah? Ano, wala na? Stereotypical course, social work is for women, expertise, mas caring, mas nurturing, men are expected to work or help the family, perception na pambabaeng kurso, stereotyping. So, dun sa tanong pa lang na why, marami na tayong pwedeng sagot. It could be cultural, it could be perception, it could be preference, it could be the availability, it could be the nature of the job, it could be ano yung tingin natin na characteristic ng isang social worker, pwedeng ganon. Or it could pertain to gender roles. No? So kapag ka ganito yung mga sagot natin, ibig sabihin, potentially may gender issue siya. Okay? Kasi i-analyze natin siya. So if we will give equal opportunity, equal chance, equal explanation, and then we will remove the stereotype, do you think that there could be more men enrolling in social work course? Okay, so those are just some gender analysis question that we need to ask para makapag-identify tayo ng gender issue. Sige, kung ang goal natin is maging equal, kunyari equal enrollment, then dun sa datos natin, mas maraming babae kaysa sa lalaki. So ano yung intervention natin na pwedeng gawin? How do we encourage more men to enroll? So ito yung mga pag-iisipan natin sa ating planning and budgeting. So when we start with the issue, we start with an analysis of the situation, and then sa GAD, sinasabi nila sa atin, ano ba yung issue ng kababaihan at kalalakihan? And then address that in development interventions. Okay? So next. Meron pa ba? So, bakit naman GAD nga? So, nagpo-progress na tayo, no? So, nagsimula tayo sa konsepto ng development at gender. Pinag-combine natin siya. Ano ba ang GAD? No? Ano ang hindi GAD? Ngayon, bakit GAD? Okay, bakit GAD? Bakit natin ina-advocate ngayon yung GAD approach? Because we say that a gender and development approach sharpens the focus of development on people. Kasi, pag sinabing GAD, ibig sabihin yan, we're looking at people. We're looking at how men and women and their relationship are, no? So, ako nga naniniwala ako talaga, lahat ng klase ng program, basta may tao, pwedeng may gender issue eh. Kailangan lang natin mag-analyze. And also, God enhances the capacities of women and men to contribute to the attainment of development goals. Kasi syempre, isasama na natin sila dun pa lang sa simula. Diba? Doon pa lang sa pagkukonsulta ng kanilang issues, sa pagpaplano, sa pag-implement, sa pag-monitor and evaluate. So, ibig sabihin nun, parte sila ng development intervention. Tapos, pag GAD, nagre-reduce ito ng social inequities dahil sa unequal social relation. Kasi nga, na-consider na natin yung inequality, yung gender issue that stems from gender stereotype. So, okay ba ang GAD, mga kaibigan, mga participants? Sa tingin nyo ba, okay siya bilang development intervention? So, we combine development and gender, and we define what is GAD, and then we justify why we need to go GAD. Okay, because it's about people, it's about our client. So, I hope everything is clear to everybody about what is gender and development. Okay. Sige, next. Ayan. So, balik ulit tayo dun sa konsepto ng development. Bakit GAD? Kasi God is about being faithful to the principle that development is for all. Para sa ating lahat. 'Di ba? Nobody left behind. Nasa ating ano yan eh, Agenda 2040, PPGD, PDP, Philippine Development Plan. Tapos, fairness and equity, pagkakapantay-pantay. Fairness ba ay pagkakapantay? Fairness, hindi ko matagalog ang fairness. Fairness and equity demands that everyone in society, tayong lahat, whether tayo ay babae o lalaki, ay mayroong pantay na karapatan, dapat may same opportunity para ma-achieve yung full and satisfying life. Okay, ang fairness daw ay pantay, pantay at equitable, no? Na society dapat tayong lahat, walang maiiwan, babae at lalaki, pare-pareho tayong uunlad, pantay-pantay, patas-patas. Yan ang God, no? So let us remove the notion that God is for women only. There are certain emphasis about women's issue because sabi nga natin, pag nakita natin sa datos, talagang kailangan pa natin ng mga affirmative action for women. But overall, it's about gender equality, about women and men being equally benefiting and contributing in development interventions to attain full and satisfying life. Therefore, development ay para sa ating lahat. Okay.
Charles, there's just a burning question. Maybe we could respond to this related on what you are emphasizing.
Go ahead.
The question is, how do you create a family when you have two women and two men as parents? Don't you think there are emotional and psychological impact on children if the parents are the same sex? Why is this being forced into the public as acceptable? There are also similar comments about this. Thank you.
Okay. Siguro ano no, kailangan nating tignan kasi part ng pagiging God advocate bilang God practitioner, yung paglawak ng ating kaisipan about the changes happening in society. 'Di ba? So yung traditional perception of family composed of men and women are already changing. Even the DepEd already accepted that. No? So kasi when we also box people na ang family ay ganito lang, we're also limiting other forms of family. No, ako personally, no, this is not a position ng PCW. Personally, I would be more accepting to other forms of family because as a God practitioner, my mind is open to those kind because ang family pwede kong ilikha, gawin, i-create with the person that I want to be with. And it's not about the sex of the person. No, it's about my preference to who I want to raise a family with. So, kung tayo ay God practitioner, dapat open tayo doon. Hindi tayo magbabox na family dapat lalaki at babae. Because there are also process of adoption, 'di ba? Merong mga pwedeng magkaroon ng anak ang lalaki, parehong lalaking couple through adoption or through natural means by their choice. Siguro kailangan lang mas maging accepting tayo. Ganun tayo sa God. It's really more, we're not saying that we are pushing these values to the public. No, we're not saying, gawin nyo to. It's not. It's just people's preferences. And therefore, if people's preferences, it's changing. No, it's not supposed to be boxed. So therefore, we should be more accepting. So sa akin, ganun yun, no? So we still need to be desensitized about how traditionally we perceive family to be. Importante sa family, nagmamahala, nagre-respeto, di ba? Sa isa't isa at nagno-nurture. No, whether the family members are of the same sex, as long as na-nurture, na-enhance, nagiging contributory sila sa society, then I don't see anything wrong with that. Okay? Ano pa? But you can debate me on that. You can have your own perception about that. That is your own God journey. I cannot convince you otherwise in this 1 minute explanation. But really, being a God practitioner is a journey. No, hindi ito madali because if you are, kunyari, I'm 45 years old. If you're a 45-year-old person na ang inculcation sa'yo ganito, traditionally ang perception mo ganito, tas ngayon mo lang to narinig yung God. It's actually challenging 45 years of what was inculcated in you. So hindi yun madaling gawin. So kailangan, ano yun, unti-unti. Diba? It's a journey actually. And good thing you're starting now. You're attending these God webinars because this is a start of the journey to being gender responsive or being gender sensitive. Okay, meron pa bang question, Mon? Before we go to a
No,
video.
we're good. Thank you.
All right. Sige. So just to end the session about GAD, no, I hope that the basic definition about gender and development is clarified. Let's watch a very short video about developed by gender equality now. Kim?
Can we repeat? There's no audio. Thank you.
Audio, Kim?
Kim, pwedeng take two ulit if there's a sound here. Maybe we could stop remove first our headset and then maximize it for a better audio. Sorry again for the little inconvenience. Mag-take two po tayo. Thank you.
Gender inequality doesn't make sense on any level. By marginalizing the rights of women, we deny ourselves the opportunity to lift millions of men, women, and children out of poverty, not to mention the chance of a just and fair world. From birth, girls and boys, women and men are expected by society to play certain roles and behave in certain ways based on traditions, religion, and other beliefs. These behaviors are learned and shape the gender norms in a society. Unfortunately, in many countries, gender norms create disadvantages for women. Often, girls are not sent to school. When they become women, they then have limited ability to earn money or realize their potential. Rural women play a major role in agricultural development. However, in many developing countries, women cannot formally own land. Without land, they cannot get loans to invest in their farms or businesses. This also means they have no control over the use of land or the benefits that come from it. Men generally control the household decisions, like how to use the family's assets. These disadvantages are often reinforced by practices that limit women's access to services, like training. Cultural beliefs can also restrict women's opportunities, such as in parts of Zambia where women cannot paddle their boats as it is considered bad omen. The result of these issues? Women remain poor and agricultural production cannot reach its potential, perpetuating poverty and hunger in the developing world. The social norms that limit women's opportunities need to be understood and then changed. By taking a gender transformative approach, we can influence social norms and bridge the gaps in access to resources and services between men and women in a lasting manner. Change is needed on many levels, and both men and women must be involved for it to happen. Research and development organizations need to invest in programs that promote gender equality alongside improving productivity and incomes. Policies need to be implemented that increase women's access to services and resources. Communities need to support women as farmers and as leaders. Increasing women's voice and agency is a valuable end in its own right. When development organizations, policies, and communities support the success of women, we have a chance to reduce extreme poverty and boost shared prosperity for girls and boys, women and men around the world.
So, ano lang siya, no? Pang-add lang na information for us. If you want access to the video, I think we can share it naman, Kim, no? I think we can share it. We will be sending a link with all the PowerPoint and the materials we used for this webinar doon sa inyong certificate when we send it to you. So, wait for that. Tsaka I think at the end of the session, we will have the link for everybody. Right, so let's continue. So I hope everyone got their coffee, went on a, pwede naman kayong tumayo while listening to the video. So let's continue na with our part 2. So let's now go to gender mainstreaming. Actually, there's a question in the Q&A box about gender mainstreaming. So hindi ko na lang siya sinagot, but I hope that I'll be able to clarify the question in this session. Okay. So we say that the gender and development approach or paradigm is translated from theory to practice through a strategy we call gender mainstreaming. So ano ba yung gender mainstreaming? Okay, first let's go to the next slide. Gender mainstreaming is actually a strategy, no? Hindi siya the strategy. It's just one of the strategy to ensure that we recognize gender issue on a sustained basis in our development intervention. And that gender equality, no? The goal of gender equality is considered in the mainstream, no? So naka quote unquote yung mainstream. So strategy siya, no? Yung gender mainstreaming. Next. Ano naman yung mainstream? Okay. So sabi natin, mainstreaming. Kasi may nagtanong, sige, I will raise na the question. Sabi niya, how can we, ilang percent ba yung GAD na gagawin ng GAD focal point sa trabaho, sa regular work nila? So ito yung sagot doon. Kasi you need to find out what is your mainstream first. No? Ano ba yung mainstream natin sa gobyerno? So, ang definition dito ng mainstream, it is composed of interrelated set of dominant ideas, perceptions, views, about gender role that is promoted by culture. So, ano yung prevailing notion in an organization, no, about gender? Yan yung mainstream natin. Or ano yung prevailing perception of the organization about their clients, about men and women, about their stakeholders. Okay, mainstream also talks about development directions and priorities. So mainstream natin, ano ba yung agenda natin? Ano ba yung development directions ng gobyerno, ng inyong secretary, ng inyong director? At ano yung priority ng inyong eskwelahan, ng inyong ospital, ng inyong organization? And also, mainstream consists also of mechanisms for decision making. What are the interagency body available, present in your organization? No, paano kayo nagde-decide? How are decisions made? Paano nyo dinidistribute ang resources in your organization? So these are your mainstream. Okay? So ang mainstream nyo in short is what you are doing. For example, if you are NEDA, what is your mainstream? Diba? NEDA is the national planning body of the government. So ang mainstream ng NEDA, they're in charge of developing, updating, and monitoring the Philippine Development Plan. Nagmo-monitor sila ng mga international ODA, yung mga projects sa ODA. So they're also into sectoral, diba? May mga sectoral agenda rin sila. So they're also in charge of the regional development councils. Okay, para ibaba yung PDP sa baba. Okay, if you are DOST, what is your mainstream? Okay, you're in charge about what? Implementing programs for science and technology, di ba? Pag ikaw ay state university, ano ang mainstream mo? You're into academic, you're into research, you're into extension program. So these are the mainstream, no? But how do you make decisions about the mainstream are part of your organizational context. Okay, so dapat malinaw muna ano yung mainstream nyo para madali yung gender mainstreaming. Alright, next. Okay, So ano pa yung mainstream? Ito din ay kasama din sa mainstream ninyo yung mga ideas and practices that you have in the organization. How do you prioritize issues? How do you decide on issues? Sometimes yung mainstream hindi siya masyadong positive kasi mahirap pumasok yung God sa mainstream, yung gender, no? Pwedeng yung attitude very patriarchal, very hierarchical, marami ring discriminatory elements sa mainstream, no? Maaaring hindi nakakapag-participate yung ibang sector sa mainstream like the marginalized groups like women in the mainstream. So, kailangan i-review muna natin yung mainstream natin para maintindihan natin paano tayo magme-mainstream ng God. Okay? Kasi hindi naman siya mahirap kapag naintindihan ninyo. Okay, next. Sige nga, paki-type nga sa chat box kayo sa agency nyo ano yung mainstream ninyo. Sige, type lang. Ano yung mainstream? Okay, meron nagsasabi science and technology, fishery development, missionary electrification, promote science and technology, academe, tourism, health for all, education and training, shelter, agrarian reform, infrastructure, legislation, yan. Ano pa? Population development, banking, taxation. Okay, water, no? Ito yung mga water district siguro, water distribution, enforcement of law, mainstream yan siguro ng mga PNP, NBI, okay, poverty reduction, disaster management. All right, so these are mainstream. So malinaw sa inyo kung anong mainstream nyo. Banking and credit, so mga taga-bangko siguro to. So simply put, again, your mainstream is what you are doing. The reason for being of your organization, that's your mainstream. Okay, so hindi tayo lalayo sa ginagawa nyo sa pag-integrate ng gender sa inyong trabaho. All right, next slide. So ito yung mga sample, no, ng possible mainstream na tinype nyo. Human resource, planning, policy making, research, hospital management, project development and implementation, legislation, investigation. So dito lang yung mga sample na tinype natin na pick up namin, no. So ito yung mainstream. So clear naman sa inyo yung mainstream nyo, di ba? So ngayon, tignan natin paano natin i-mainstream yung God. Sige nga, next. Okay, so there are certain things that we should do para ma-facilitate yung mainstreaming ng God sa inyong ginagawa. Remember, your mainstream is not changing, ha? God is not changing your mainstream because God is riding into the mainstream. Okay? Kaya dapat, yung pag-iisip na ang God ay 10%, yung regular ay 90%, hindi dapat ganun. Kasi dapat, yung gender, pinapasok natin sa 100%. Okay? Ang daling sabihin, pero mahirap gawin. So, ito yung mga possible nating intervention para ma-facilitate yung pag-mainstream natin ng God sa ating mga ginagawa. Dapat, meron tayong God focal point system, tapos functional siya. Okay, so under our Magna Carta of Women, yun pong God focal point is a mandatory mechanism already. Ibig sabihin nito, dapat lahat tayo sa government may God focal point. Kapag wala kayong God focal point, excuse me, you are violating the Magna Carta. So pwede kayong ma-investigate ni CHR, ha? Ngayon, yung God focal point, bakit importante sila? Hindi ang God focal point ang gagawa ng gender mainstreaming mag-isa. They could lead. Okay? They could orchestrate. But gender mainstreaming is the responsibility of the whole organization. Nandun din yan sa PPGD, na-mention niya ni Attorney Eric kanina, di ba? Sa institutional mechanism. So, ang God focal point, dapat meron kayo para sila lang yung manguna, pero sila yung actually magmamandate sa mga different bureaus ng agency nyo na gawin natin to at tutulong pag-monitor at pag-implement. So the role of the God focal point is not just to be the only group in charge of gender mainstreaming in the agency, because by law, by policy, and should be by practice, dapat it's the whole organization, especially the top level official of the agency. Then, dapat meron tayong mga gender analysis tools na ginagamit para matuto tayong mag-identify ng mga gender issue. Nako, kung merong isang tao lang na God focal point, violation again of the Magna Carta, because it says already system. It's a God focal point system, not God focal person. Okay? So kung mag-isa ka pa lang sa GAD, sabihin mo sa boss, sa supervisor mo, ay teka lang po, parang nagba-violate po tayo sa Magna Carta kasi sabi na sa Magna Carta, it's the GAD focal point system. Mag-isa lang po akong napo-point. So you're just the God focal point. So hindi nyo po kaya mag-isa yan. Kailangan may kasama kayo kasi it's really the whole organization's agenda. And then dapat meron kayong GAD plan and budget na ginagawa para yung annual implementation ng GAD program matatrack natin. Tapos of course dapat meron kayong sexist aggregated data na nagagamit for analysis and for monitoring and evaluation. And of course, if you have your own GAD tools, dapat na the database din natin yan para hindi tayo nawawala. Kunyari, ang problem ng ibang GAD focal point, pag napalitan, parang yung pumalit na GAD focal point, parang hindi na niya alam saan siya magsisimula. Dapat hindi ganon. Dapat maayos din yung transitioning natin.
Charles,
Yes.
there's a comment here. Kasi, di ba, GAD, parang common ito, naririnig natin in most agencies. GAD is an add-on work. How can GAD be appreciated by workers, especially the high-ranking officials? Related to your point. Thank you.
Siyempre, klaro naman, di ba, since the start of this webinar, that we have the mandate. So kapag sinabing mandate, government ang may responsibility doon. And if part ka ng government, dapat i-own up mo yung mandate. But of course, our top level officials, kailangan din, siyempre natin bilang GAD focal point, kayo sa GAD focal point, is to help convince them, no? Give them the leveling session para maintindihan nila what is it's at stake. Actually, kapag na-audit kayo, nag-ombud kayo, ang mananagot actually dyan is the head of the agency. Kasi 'di ba meron yang hierarchy of command responsibility. No, pag sinabi may command responsibility, whoever is on top should be the one to answer. Kasi kahit sa COA, 'di ba, pag may AOM, it's really the head of the agency ang sinusulatan. So, ganun din naman kapag ka nag-investigate si CHR for non-compliance sa Magna Carta, it's going to be the head of the agency who should answer for that. So, sasabihin natin sa kanila, you have the responsibility under the law, and then we have also responsibility sa ating client. So, kailangan ng mga executive briefings dyan, kailangan ng GAD focal point, meron talaga kayong very clear analysis na ipapakita sa kanila na ito yung gender issue at ito yung kailangan natin i-address sa ating mainstream interventions. So, maraming challenge no sa GAD focal point system. Kailangan talaga, actually dito sa slide na to, meron yung sinasabing for mainstreaming to work, dapat may top level support. Kasi without top support, kahit gaano kadaming iiyak na luha, bilang GAD focal point, hindi talaga masyado magpo-progress, no? So kailangan talaga, very crucial talaga ang top level support, and we really need to convince our top level on that. Okay, next. Okay, so this is just to reiterate, no, this has already been mentioned previously by Attorney Eric, that officially the Philippine government adopted gender mainstreaming as a strategy since 1995. So 1995 to 2000, ilang taon na ang GAD mainstreaming? 25 years old na ba siya? Okay, so ibig sabihin medyo nasa na siya, marrying age ang gender mainstreaming. So dapat alam na niya, pinapasok niya. So, this was officially adopted as a strategy to ensure that gender perspective is reflected in all policies and programs at the national, regional, international levels, so that before we make a decision, we do an analysis para makita natin yung effect ng development intervention to women and men. So, nakadugtong din talaga yung GAD sa gender mainstreaming kasi nga ito yung how we translate the theory to practice. So, it was endorsed in 1995. Next slide. Okay, so in-emphasize niya ang dalawang aspeto, no? Dapat yung gender equality concerns ay nandun, no, sa ating mga proseso mula sa pag-analyze ng polisiya, pag-formulate ng policy, ng programs, tapos kasi kailangan ma-ensure natin na may positive impact ito sa kababaihan at kalalakihan para ma-reduce yung gender disparities. Tapos kailangan ma-include natin yung interests, needs, experiences, and visions of women, no, in the definition of development approaches, policies, programs. Ibig sabihin, we hear them, we listen to them. Kasi part of a gender-responsive approach to developing interventions like policies and program is to consult our beneficiary. Now, if you're familiar with the HAGA-DAGA or the Harmonized GAD guidelines, Harmonized Gender Development Guidelines is developed by NEDA, PCW, and ODA GAD Network. Part of our first two requirement or elements of the harmonized GAD guidelines is the consultation of women and men beneficiaries in problem identification and consultation of women and men in terms of the design of the intervention and of course gender analysis of data. So kailangan nakakonsider natin yon sa ating mga development intervention. So nire-reiterate siya ng gender mainstreaming. Next. Okay, so officially, UN ECOSOC proposed for this definition in 1997 of gender mainstreaming. So they said that gender mainstreaming is a strategy for making women's and men's concerns and experiences an integral dimension of the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of policies and programs in all political, economic, and societal spheres so that women and men benefit equally and inequality is perpetuated. Okay, so sinasabi niya dapat making sure na yung concerns, experiences nila are made part of our designing, implementing, and monitoring of interventions like programs and policies para ma-ensure natin that women and men benefit equally in development intervention at mawala yung inequality. So yan yung point ng gender mainstreaming. Next. Okay, ano pa? Gender mainstreaming means there is an inclusion of gender perspective. Okay, so ito na yun ha. You have a mainstream, you're clear about your mainstream. For you to do gender mainstreaming, you have to include gender perspective. So hindi siya dapat separate. You have to just include yung itong lente ng GAD. Ibig sabihin, kailangan marunong tayong mag-identify ng potential gender issue sa implementation at sa huli, mga development intervention. So if your mainstream is research and development, dapat ba may separate gender research and development ka? Or you just integrate a gender perspective in the current research and development agenda? That's a mainstream. If your mainstream is legislation, dapat ba may separate gender legislation ka pa? Or sa lahat ng ginagawa nating batas, dapat ma-incorporate natin yung gender lens? Diba? Dapat makita na natin whether we're preparing a law about tax reform or whether we're preparing a legislation about insurgency. Mga mahirap yung pwede na natin ma-integrate dapat yung gender doon. Hindi dapat yung gender nandun lang siya sa Committee on Women and Gender Equality. Pwedeng sa Committee on Revision of Laws, meron kang ini-integrate na gender. Or sa Committee on Health, 'di ba? Committee on what? On constitutional amendment, dapat meron na rin doon. So yun yung mainstream. It's about the gender perspective. Now, ang challenge dyan is who will have gender perspective? Sino ba dapat ang may gender perspective, mga kapatid? Sige nga, pakitype nga sa chat box. Who should have gender perspective? May idea ba kayo? Dapat ba yung lang GAD focal point? Yung top level lang? Okay, dapat tayong lahat. Tama. Because sabi nga natin, GAD, gender mainstreaming is an organizational agenda dapat. It's not just the role of a small group of people. Siguro may small group of people na magsisimula bilang focal, pero dapat na-influence niya yung the rest of the members of the organization, di ba? So, ibig sabihin, kung ikaw ay focal point ngayon, tas naalis ka sa focal point, kakalimutan mo na ba yung GAD? Dapat hindi ganon. Kunyari, nasa GAD focal point ka, tapos nalipat ka sa ibang agency, hindi ka na GAD focal point, pero may alam ka na sa GAD. Diba? Kahit hindi ka member ng GAD focal point, pwede mong ma-integrate yung gender perspective sa ginagawa mo. For example, nasa HR ka, human resource person ka, may gender ba doon? Pwede ka bang mag-integrate ng gender perspective sa recruitment, hiring, promotion? Ano sa tingin nyo? Yes. Sagot ba yan sa tanong ko? Opo, pwede. Paano kaya? Paano kaya natin ma-integrate yung gender perspective sa human resource and development? Ang civil service, meron na silang checklist, di ba? Yung HR, ano nga yung tawag doon, Mon? Yung sa CSC?
Prime HRM.
HRM, sorry CSC. Meron na silang Prime HRM na meron na ring element ng GAD, di ba? Okay. So sometimes just the act of posting our vacancy, we can also integrate already the God perspective doon. Di ba wala na dapat preferably male, preferably female, meron pang ganon. Tapos meron na dapat, this is an equal opportunity organization. We welcome all applicants from all sexes and gender orientation, pwedeng ganon, di ba? So by using language, we can also promote gender sensitivity or integration of gender perspective in what we do. How much time do I still have? Okay. Sige, I hope that is clear already. Integration of gender perspective. So for you to have gender perspective, kailangan mag-aral kayo. Kailangan mag-attend kayo ng mga seminar. Kailangan magbasa kayo ng mga guide at kailangan i-practice nyo yon. Kasi hindi lang enough na nakikinig kayo dito, pagkatapos nyo naman, balik nyo na sa opisina, sa bahay, kakalimutan nyo na hindi nyo i-apply. For us to be able to inculcate, internalize gender perspective is we practice it. We practice being a gender sensitive person. Okay, we have to be able to practice it at both a personal and professional level. Siguro pag nakakakita kayo sa labas, meron na tayong ano ngayon, 'di ba? Safe Spaces Act. Na pag nakakakita na tayo talaga sa labas ng talagang medyo nanghaharas ng ibang tao, we can already call their attention to that. 'Di ba? So kasama 'yon. Tapos yung paggamit ng mga pronoun na puro he, puro chairman, puro ganun. Utang na loob bilang God focal person, kailangan kasama na yun sa minomonitor nyo. Kasi that's also using gender fair language, being not using a standard pronoun. Kasi dapat fairness, di ba? Equity. So chairperson, ganon yung gagamitin natin. Next, gender mainstreaming also involves changing policies and institution to actively promote gender equality. So it's about challenging the status quo. So kapag nakikita natin yung mainstream natin ay merong problem, pwede tayo mag-change ng mga policy. Pwede tayo mag-revise ng policy natin. Pwede tayong mag-reorient ng ating mga institutional mechanisms. Yun yung gender mainstreaming. Sometimes, kung wala pa talagang policy, pwedeng new policy siya, no? Pero kung may existing policy, we can revise the policy, amend the policy, and integrate yung gender consideration in policy issuances. Okay. All right. So I hope that's clear. What else? All right. So klaro tayo ha. Ito ang goal natin. Parang sa GAD rin, di ba? Ang goal is equality between women and men, making sure that gender equality is part of the fundamental value in development choices and institutional practices. Yan yung ating gustong gawin if we implore gender mainstreaming as a strategy. So, hindi po siya dapat separate. Again, kaya ako nagsimula sa ano ang mainstream nyo. Because mainstream, you integrate gender perspective in your mainstream, that's already gender mainstreaming. But of course, we have some tools for that and we have some guideposts for that para mas mag-guide tayo lahat. Next. Hence, the efforts to achieve gender equality are brought into the mainstream. So yung mainstream natin, hindi siya dapat, meron kami na-encounter, parang meron kaming 5%, tapos meron kaming regular. So parang pag sinabi mo yung 5%, yun yung GAD. Yung mainstream, yun yung 95%. Actually, dapat hindi ganon. Yung GAD is just a startup budget to make sure that you influence the 95% of your mainstream budget. So we should brought gender equality goal, concerns, and integrate gender perspective in the mainstream para ma-pursue natin yung development within the mainstream of our organization, within the reason for being of our organization. So kapag klaro yun sa atin, hindi tayo mawawala sa gender mainstreaming. Next. Ayan, di ba? So, pinapasok na natin yung God perspective. Therefore, nagme-mainstream tayo sa ilog kung saan tayo lumalangoy bilang organisasyon. Therefore, we now eliminate women and gender issues kasi na-integrate na natin yung ating concern sa ating mainstream, yung gender perspective. At hindi na rin tayo nako-confuse kung ano ba talaga yung separate ba yung God o hindi ba separate yung God. It's supposed to be mainstreaming. Ibig sabihin, lahat ng ginagawa nyo potentially merong God. Next. Now, let's talk about the Philippine gender mainstreaming strategy. So I hope everybody is clear about the definition of gender mainstreaming. Okay? Can I see a thumbs up? Meron bang thumbs up sign dito? Okay, wala pala. Can I see a 1 if it's clear and 2 if it's not clear? Sana walang 2 kasi uulit ako. Ayan. So I'm thanking everybody for saying that it's clear so far. All right, so let's now go to our gender mainstreaming strategy in the Philippines. So, again, para sa pagyayabang, magyayabang talaga ako. Actually, tayo sa Pilipinas, medyo advanced tayo sa ating gender mainstreaming intervention, no, compared to other ASEAN countries. Meron din silang sarili nila, hindi ko sinasabing wala. Pero lagi tayong na-invite internationally para mag-discuss ng strategy ng Philippines. In fact, last 2 years, we hosted an international ASEAN conference on gender mainstreaming. 3 times, no, we hosted that for the 3 pillars of the ASEAN. So we invited all the 10 AMS, Asian member states in the Philippines para dito sa Pilipinas para aralin yung gender mainstreaming. So ano ba yung gender mainstreaming strategy ng Philippines? So of course the big red circle, mukha siyang parol, no? Pag tinignan nyo, mukha ba siyang parol? Nakikita nyo ba yung buntot tapos yung bilog? Okay, the big circle is the goal. Okay, that's our end goal, which is to achieve gender equality and empower women and girls. Now, paano natin yung ginagawa? Meron tayong dalawang approaches. We go into development planning kasi nandyan yung ating mainstream. And of course, we influence the mainstream by improving our institution. Kaya tayo may mga entry points for gender mainstreaming. So, ang ating development planning, ito yung ating ginagawa sa agency. Di ba? Lahat naman ata tayo marunong mag-development planning kasi hindi pwedeng wala tayong plan, di ba? At part of the development planning is also our programs. Okay, na meron tayo sa agency. And then, we also have our institutional development. Ito yung mga tao natin sa institusyon, yung mga mekanismo natin, yung mga existing mainstream processes that we also need to influence. So these are the 2 tracks of the Philippine gender mainstreaming strategy. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so we have an entry point, no? Sabi, paano ba tayo magsisimula sa gender mainstreaming? Kasi it's about integrating gender perspective. So sabi natin, these are possible entry points for gender mainstreaming. Lahat ba ng agency nyo gumagawa ng policy? Yes or no? Pakita at back. Yes or no? Meron bang agency dito na hindi gumagawa ng policy? Okay, lahat ba ng agency may tao? Siyempre naman siguro, no? Okay, lahat ba ng agency may programs, projects, and activities? Lahat ba ng agencies merong database, merong mga mechanisms like mga interagency, division, mga mechanisms? Meron ba kayong mga recruitment board? Meron ba kayong mga promotion board? Meron ba kayong mga data, knowledge management system? So if your answers to all of these entry points are yes, therefore, lahat kayo pwede mag-mainstream ng GAD. Okay. So sabi natin, policy could be an entry point because we all issue policy. Okay, so we just need to make sure that the policies we issued are responsive to the situation of both women and men, beneficiaries or clients, or whoever the policy is directed to. Our people, we have people internally in the organization and externally as our stakeholders and our partners. So our people should be capacitated on GAD so that yung mga ginagawa nila dito sa PAPS, programs, projects, and activities, sa pag-develop ng policy at pag-maintain ng enabling mechanisms, ma-integrate yung gender perspective. So people are very important element of entry point for gender. So kasama dyan yung sponsor. Ang sponsor, ito yung top level people nyo. No, so kailangan talaga ma-influence ang ating mga executives para masabi natin na magwo-work yung gender mainstreaming. Then we have our change agents, kayo yon, mga GAD focal point system members. And then we also have our targets. These are your clients. Clients nyo pwedeng yung mga taga-opisina or yung mga taga-public or yung mga labas, no? Or other agencies could also be your client. And the other advocates na nagpupush sa inyo to do something. So people is an entry point for gender mainstreaming. Programs, projects, and activities, I am sure lahat tayo meron yan. Kasi kung wala kayong budget. Then of course, yung mga enabling mechanism, nandito yung ating mga, yun nga, as I said, database, nandito yung mga interdivision mechanism, interorganizational mechanisms, nandito yung mga desk natin, ito yung mga coding mechanisms. So if all of these are present in everything, therefore, all of these could be entry points for gender mainstreaming. Pero syempre, hindi natin sinasabi na mas importante yung isa. Lahat yan equally important. Kaya sa GMF tool natin, lahat yan tigto 25 points. Then of course, sige na, go, next na. If we have the entry points, so bawat steps ng development planning process, potentially, pasok yung mga entry points, di ba? So planning, may tao sa planning, may policies tungkol sa planning, may program tungkol sa planning, may enabling mechanism sa planning. Same with programming, budgeting, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. So itong step ng development planning process na to, lahat tayo ginagawa natin to, mainstream natin to. Therefore, lahat ito pwedeng pasukan ng GAD perspective. That's really the point of gender mainstreaming. So how do we integrate gender perspective in the implementation? We make sure that the people implementing are capacitated. We make sure we have very clear policies about implementation. We make sure that the mechanism to ensure effective implementation na gender responsive are in place. And then, monitoring and evaluation. Dapat may klaro din tayong policy on this. May klaro tayong datos, sexist aggregated ba yan? May klarong indicators. Okay? Meron tayong mga tao na gagawa ng M&E at klaro kung paano nila gagawin yun. Klaro kung anong hahanapin nila sa M&E para makita yung gender impact ng mga programs natin at ng mga plans natin. So, overall, ito yung strategy natin on how to do gender mainstreaming. Next. Okay, so for purposes of short introduction, we have a tool. Now, currently, as an organizational tool, the PCW revised the Gender Mainstreaming Evaluation Framework. This is a tool that we relaunched last 2016, which provides a holistic view of the gender mainstreaming processes of an agency. It serves as a tool to track and assess your progress of gender mainstreaming. So kung gusto nyong malaman kung how far have you gone, how far have you reached gender mainstreaming, so ito yung tool na pwede nyong gamitin. So ayan, ni-launch namin yan. Ako yun, no, yung isang yung naka-black. Next. What else? Next na. So sa GMF tool, meron na tayong levels, no, of gender mainstreaming. This will be further explained next session in our discussion about the GMF tool. But dati, meron lang tayong 4 levels. But we introduced the 5th level, which is replication and innovation, para ma-recognize naman natin yung 25 years of gender mainstreaming natin. Kasi 25 years na tayo, so siguro naman, meron na tayong mga good practices on gender mainstreaming. No? May mga ibang agencies na meron yan. So, anong level kaya kayo? Nakapag-assess na ba kayo ng gender mainstreaming? May I know from the participants, who among you have already assessed your gender mainstreaming? Sige nga, pakitype yes. Tapos, or your agency kung meron. Yung mga nakapag-assess na ng GMF. Ayan, so si LSU, DOST, DSWD, TSU, so NEDA, sorry, ang bilis. DA, PICC, TIESA, BMB, PESA, DOS, DNR. So, okay, DFA. So, salamat, no, sa MRT. Salamat dun sa mga nakapaggamit na ng Gender Mainstreaming Evaluation Framework. At least, diba, more or less, alam nyo na asan kayo sa level. So, yung mga hindi pa nakakapag-GMF, pwede kayong mag-enroll or makinig sa next session natin, sa next webinar para matutunan nyo how it's done. Okay, next. Meron na rin tayong, okay. So we have, actually we developed a video of the GMF on how to apply the GMF. But for now, we will just, parang soft launch of the video. This is just an introduction to the GMF tool, which we want everybody. This is the first time that everyone kami rin, will be viewing this. Tayong lahat sabay-sabay manood of the overview of the GMF tool. Sige nga, Kim.
The Gender Mainstreaming Evaluation Framework.
Chapter 2, Overview of the GMF Tool. In order to determine the progress of agencies in gender mainstreaming, the PCW developed the Gender Mainstreaming Evaluation Framework, or GMEF tool, in 1996. In 2014, the PCW embarked on the process of updating the GMEF tool. The enhancement process served as an opportunity to apply the valuable experiences of PCW and its partners in gender mainstreaming. It also took into account the relevant provisions of the Magna Carta of Women and noteworthy GAD efforts that are now being recognized as standard gender mainstreaming practices. The enhanced GMEF now contains updated descriptors and scoring system. It features 5 levels of gender mainstreaming instead of 4, and generates results that will assist organizations in locating and responding to gender gaps and needs of clients and the organization. As a self-assessment tool, the ultimate goal of the regular application of the GMEF tool is to make gender perspective an integral part of the mainstreaming processes and systems of government. This is to ensure that the impacts of government programs are enjoyed by both WANAs and WANs equally.
Okay, yun na ba yun? Di pa ba? Okay, so yun na yun. Actually, this is a 22-minute video, pero ma-divide siya into parts. So para madali lang siya ma-access, i-upload namin to sa YouTube ng PCW. There's a PCW sa YouTube account, so you can actually look into that. Marami kaming mga videos doon that you can use in your GAD advocacy work. Okay, so just to, I'm starting to wrap up, so I hope that everything is clear about gender mainstreaming, but just to let everybody know that we do recognize good practices on gender mainstreaming. In fact, we have been giving the GAD Timpala Award for 2 seasons now. So i-relaunch lang namin to noong August 2018, and this is the official GAD incentive and award system of the PCW. So continue doing your good practices on GAD gender mainstreaming kasi malay nyo, ma-awardan din kayo sa GAD Timpala. So can we see sino ba yung mga na-awardan na ng PCW? This is just to promote their efforts. Next slide. Alright, so ito yung na-awardan namin last year during the anniversary of the MCW noong August. So we have 6 agencies. We have COA, Commission on Higher Education. We have the Department of Labor and Employment, the National Housing Authority, the National Economic and Development Authority, at ang Commission on Filipinos Overseas. So sila yung may mga good practices already on gender mainstreaming. So kung gusto nyong matuto, medyo itap nyo rin siguro sila, no? Baka pwede rin silang magbigay sa inyo ng tips on how to make gender mainstreaming work. Next. Ayan, ito yung mga pictures. So, syempre gusto natin makita tayo. May malaking ano pa yan. May malaking marker na pwede nating ilagay sa harap ng opisina natin. Sige, next. Okay, yan. Just to promote the awardees of the GAD Timpala and to, of course, encourage everybody to do your part para next time kayo naman yung bibigyan natin ng recognition. Okay? All right, last few slides. Okay, so while we have been doing this for 25 years, of course, there are still challenges in gender mainstreaming in the Philippines. And these are just some of the things that we have identified. This is by all means not exhaustive, but for purposes of this presentation, I'd like to share some of these challenges. At the policy level, syempre, kailangan nyo na po ng GAD agenda. Utang na loob, mga kapatid. Because the GAD agenda now is your long-term strategic plan for GAD that could, really track your gender mainstreaming progress. So para hindi na po kayo hirap na hirap every year gumawa ng GAD plan, gawin nyo na po yung GAD agenda nyo. And we have a special webinar on the GAD agenda on November 16 or November 15. So GAD agenda is still absent in most agencies. Okay, people, we need to sustain the capacities of GAD focal point system members, program implementers on gender analysis kasi parang ang ano natin is na kailangan sustained yung capacity, no? It doesn't mean that when you attend 2 trainings, expert ka na. Actually, kami sa PCW, if we attend GAD training, mas may natututunan pa kaming iba. So, continue to participate kahit na hindi kayo matanggap sa webinar, manood kayo sa Facebook. Kasi, hindi naman, importante yung certificate masyado. Ang importante natututunan natin kung ano yung dapat matutunan natin, di ba? So enabling mechanism, tumataas, bumababa ang utilization ng GAD budget, pero ayokong i-preempt pero mag-i-issue po kami ng budget call ngayong buwan, September. At nakalagay po doon, kung hindi matatanggal, na hindi po namin i-endorse ang GAD budget na hindi makaka-reach ng 5%, ng at least 5%, kasi it's in the law. So dati nakakapag-endorse pa kami ng GAD plan na less than 5%. Ngayon, we will be stricter on this. Okay, so watch out for the issuance of PCW of the GAD budget call for the preparation of FY 2021 GAD budget. Tapos GAD is not yet integrated in the M&E system. Ibig sabihin, hindi nyo pa masyadong nagagamit yung compendium of GAD indicators, hindi pa kayo nakakakolect ng datos or indicator about GAD. So please, mainstream GAD in your M&E system. Tapos, yung results, no? Yung sa POPs natin. So, kailangan din natin ng medyo, hindi na lang puro training. Of course, training is important, but we need to look at your mainstream flagship program. Paano nyo na-influence yun para mas maging gender responsive? Para yung impact ng malalaking budget na project ninyo, gender responsive. Okay, so importante po yun. Look at your mainstream program. Ito yung pwede nating ma-integrate ng GAD perspective using a tool called the Hagadaga. So again, we have a separate session on that. But please, kahit wala pa yung webinar, mag-aral na lang kayo, mag-download kayo ng mga materials sa PCW. So, the work of the GAD focal point is not easy, di ba? Kasi for now, add-on lang siya. So, nakikita ko sa Q&A box, merong mga tanong about pwede bang may separate GAD office, pwede bang may separate na position for GAD. Our advocacy, na-raise na rin yan sa isang GAD focal point assembly. And we have already advocated for the issuance of an executive order on that. But it's still under review na magkaroon ng opportunity ang mga agency na mag-create ng GAD office para maging secretariat ng GAD focal point. Hindi ibig sabihin yung GAD office ang gagawa ng GAD. Okay, the GAD office will serve as secretariat to the GAD focal point para yung mga administrative requirements, sila yung gagawa, but the mainstream requirement will still be done by the GAD focal point. So ganun yun kaso wala pa po yung EO na yun. So antay-antay po tayo, advocate lang muna tayo doon. So these are the challenges that we have now, but I hope you will consider this, consider developing your GAD agenda, sustaining the capacities of your GAD focal point, make use of your GAD budget judiciously, use the tool, the Hagadaga, for your mainstream and flagship programs. Next. Okay, so how do we make gender mainstreaming work? Ito na po, just a few slides to end this session. Of course, you have to analyze and transform your mainstream. Diba? So nagsimula tayo sa session sa part 2 ng session na to sa pag-identify nyo ng mainstream. Therefore, for it to work, look back into your mainstream. Because doon kayo mag-integrate ng gender perspective. Then challenge issues of the distribution of power, both institutional and the national level, and in the global political economy. So every time that we see that there is this disparity, there is discrimination, as GAD practitioners, we can challenge that. We can raise that concern, di ba? Maging part yon ng psychology natin, ng psyche natin na, that's not fair. Okay, that's discriminatory, or that's making the other person feel weaker, di ba? So sometimes the word that we utter, the words that we say can also be very discriminatory. Siyempre ako din personally, minsan, dapat hindi ko sinabi yun. Kasi we have to always watch out for sa ating sarili sa mga sinasabi natin. Next. How do we make mainstreaming work? GAD focal point, you should be very creative and innovative, no? Kailangan, hindi tayo ito lang yung gagawin namin. By being creative and by innovating, mas marami kayong ma-identify na issues at marami kayong strategies para ma-resolve ang problem. Sometimes, ang isang problem cannot just be solved by one intervention. It could be multiple intervention. Or multiple intervention could solve multiple problems. So, kailangan, klaro yung pagiging creative and innovative ninyo para yung inyong mga ginagawa ay klaro ang development, ang gender impact at results. Tapos, you should need to continuously develop technical gender expertise in different sectors, especially economic development, poverty reduction, research, analysis. So, kung ikaw ay hindi GAD focal point, hindi ibig sabihin hindi ka na kailangan maging GAD practitioner. Kung ikaw ay nasa accounting, pwede ka pa rin maging gender practitioner, pwede ka pa rin ma-learn ng GAD. Kung ikaw ay nasa extension program sa university, dapat mas may GAD ka nga. Lalo na yung mga research, lalo na yung, kung nasa taxation ka, why not? Diba? So kailangan natin ng different sectoral expertise. So may sectoral expertise na kayo sa agency nyo, lalagyan nyo na lang ng GAD perspective. Next. Okay? I think this is, next slide, Kim. Ito na, just to end it, bakit tayo, again, going back, this is a fundamental, previous slide please. Why us? Why us, GAD focal point? Go back to the previous slide. Okay, why us? Because gender issue affect everybody. We have to recognize that. Kahit sabihin mo pang never ako naka-identify, naka-experience ng gender issue, one way or another, you will experience that. And meron kang kilalang naka-experience that. But instead of solving them, sometimes if we don't act, we contribute to their perpetuation. And everyone that believes in the vision of attaining full and satisfying life for all, that development is for all, has an obligation to pursue GAD. Next. As government institutions, we are mandated by international treaties, commitments, laws, and policies. Very clear yan na explain sa atin, so wala nang debate about that. And dahil nasa gobyerno tayo, we are the duty bearer. We are the custodians of people's trust and resources. Therefore, yung mga capacity natin bilang government workers, yung skills natin, dapat we make development work for everybody. So kaya po tayo nandito. Okay? Next slide. I think that's it. And then these are just the things that we can do para mas maging gender responsive tayo. We should start by respecting every person, individual's rights and preferences regardless of age, ability, belief, religion, educational attainment, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, marital status, and everything. As a GAD practitioner, we have to be very respectful. We have to be very respectful of the preference of others. Hindi natin dapat i-box yung mga tao kung ano yung paniniwala natin because kailangan tayo yung mag-promote ng equality and acceptance. Okay? So we should recognize that there is inequality in the home, in the community, and in the institution that should be changed. Okay, so unti-unti nalalaman natin yan by integrating GAD perspective within our mindset. And dapat meron tayong gender lens, no, to fulfill our tasks in our agency para ma-examine natin yung differential situation ng women and men para ma-incorporate natin yun sa ating mga ginagawa. Okay? So, I think that's it. Next slide, Kim. Yes, that ends the presentation about GAD and gender mainstreaming. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating.
Thank you very much, Narls, for the very insightful discussion. We hope you are learning. Again, sa mga nasa FB Live at saka sa Zoom, if you are learning, please type learning. Dadako na tayo sa question and answer. Because we are actually pressed for time, maybe we could answer about 2 to 3 questions. May I invite again Attorney Eric and Narls for the question. Yung isa dito na nakalista, Narls, is that, ma'am, the sample given regarding gender issues involves men and women. Galing po ito kay Robbie Vanessa Peralta. How about those members of the LGBTQ? How can we more responsive to their issues? Is there also a kind of list for this?
Okay. Ako ba sasagot nito? Baka gusto ni Attorney Eric sumagot.
Any one of you can answer.
Sige, let me just give a very quick answer. When we talk about gender issue, we're not just talking about binary issue, no? Remember, women and men are also meron din tayong sexual orientation and gender identity. This was discussed last session, so I hope you listen to that. That as women, as a woman, I also have my sexual orientation and gender identity. So hindi naman exclusive sa LGBT, ang SOGI ay hindi exclusive sa LGBTQI. Everybody has SOGI SC, no? So ibig sabihin, everybody could have gender issue regardless of whether your sexual orientation and gender identity is different from another person. So hindi naman siya exclusive lang na binary na men and women. So we expand our analysis to cover this aspect of SOGI-SC. So yun naman yung ginagawa natin sa GAD.
Thank you, Niles. Attorney Eric, maybe comment, very short comment, please. Maybe I will pose another question. This is regarding the involvement of the private sector. How do we now engage also the private sector?
Okay, actually, I answered it in the chat, no? But,
yes,
of course, yes, Sir.
Yeah, go ahead, please answer
Actually,
and maybe emphasize.
Well, the mandates on gender mainstreaming is really focused on the government agencies, no. However, we must know that there are a lot of GAD-related laws that the private sector must also follow. Particularly, Republic Act 777 on sexual harassment, which imposes several provisions that an educational training environment or workplace institution must comply with. And also the new law of Republic Act 11313, wherein the details on the specific things that the private sector must do are also provided there. So by having these kinds of provisions, and the question kasi ito, paano daw siya iyan sa private sector? By making them aware of these laws, somehow they will be the concept of gender and development will be already mainstream in their respective policies kasi they must have to comply with this. So I hope that will be a good start. But policy-wise, wala kasi napapahagingan lang siya. No? In fact, in the Magna Carta of Women, talagang yung specific agencies lang ng gobyerno ang talaga naka-indicate noon. But it doesn't mean that the private sector will be exempted from that. Kasi nga, laws that are promulgated, for them to properly implement it, there must be some sort of understanding or awareness on their part.
Yeah. That's
related question, may nakasuhan na po bang agency regarding compliance? Like for example, we mentioned kanina on the gender ombud. Meron na po bang nakasuhang agency na non-compliant sila sa pag-implement ng GAD?
Ako ang alam ko, merong mga list of cases ang CHR na naka-file. At meron na rin sila. So I think it would be the CHR who can answer that about sa GAD Ombud. But they have a GAD Ombud guidelines, and I think meron na rin naman. But we just don't have the actual number here. But maybe Attorney Eric knows something about that.
Actually, I'm not aware po no, of the data on agencies that were charged and or prosecuted or who were made liable. No? But it doesn't mean na naman na wala and the law must not be complied with. So without knowing whether there was someone who was or an agency that was held liable or not, I think the important thing is that we learn how to follow what was provided for in the Magna Carta of Women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Quick, na lang. Last two questions. Maybe can we answer two more? There's a quick question from the Facebook from Miss Glimsmin Tesulua. Do you have a GAD research agenda para po ma-introduce sa research office of the university? Nars, you may want to answer this.
In our previous board, there is a research agenda actually na pinropose yung policy development. Research agenda ba yun? Policy agenda pala yun. Sorry. I think the available research agenda could be found in existing plans like the PPGD and the GWE plan. So meron doong possible areas for research na wala pa kasi kailangan natin ng mga information So you just have to look
at those reference materials for you to be able to see that. We have to check with our policy division, policy PDP Med, if they have made it public yung list of policy agenda that they have asked the Board of Commissioners to approve. But as to research agenda, I think you can get it from existing plans of the government like the PPGD and the JW plan.
Okay, I may add, Ma'am Narlene, no?
Go
There
ahead.
is this CHED Memorandum Order number 1 series of 2015, which provides for the research agenda and research trusts that are the SUCs and private HEIs must comply with. No? So maybe perhaps you can check also the existing provisions that the academic institutions must follow when it going forward with the research agenda that you're looking for.
Yeah.
I think thank you. We have a final question. Ito, huling hirit. We are on the opinion that God should not be an ad hoc in nature. Tama po yan. That's why we want to mainstream it. We recommended that at least one plantilla item be reserved for God. What is the latest DBM stand on this? Have they changed their opposition to this? Do we have news or update?
Wala pa ata. We still need to resubmit our proposal for an executive order for the creation of a GAD office or a plantilla for GAD. Wala naman ang problema sa plantilla for GAD because there's already an item called the GAD specialist, no, gender and development specialist under the existing position classification standard. Mga PCW staff po kasi are GAD specialist, so pwede naman siyang kopyahin. But of course, when we say creating position, that will entail kasi budget on the part of the government. So, ang pwede kasi sigurong strategy is mag-ano kayo, mag-reassign. For now, no, na wala pang plantilla, meron kayong existing plantilla, i-reassign nyo siya as GAD specialist that will have the GAD focal point. Yun yung pwedeng alternative for now na wala pa yung approval from the DBM of the creation of a plantilla position for GAD.
All right. Thank you. I think that concludes our question and answer. Maraming salamat po, Attorney Eric and Attorney Ms. Narls.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone.
Now I will go to the synthesis quickly. It's already 4:53 in the time. So I will not make the synthesis long, but this is the thoughts that this webinar focuses on. To synthesize the key points raised in today's discussion, gender mainstreaming ensures that our work is of higher quality and has a greater relevance for society because it makes the entry points, yung policies, people, enabling mechanisms, and our PPAs respond more effectively to the needs of our clients and stakeholders, women and men, girls and boys, including those of diverse SOGSC. Attorney Eric highlighted the policy imperatives like the UN CEDAW, SDGs, Beijing Platform for Action, MCW, PDP, GW, the GW plan, and NARS emphasized the Gender Mainstreaming Evaluation Framework, or GMEF, a tool to assess the level of gender mainstreaming in agencies. She also defined development about attaining a full and satisfying life for all, and that's the very essence of gender and development. She emphasized that attaining a full and satisfying life for all is a shared responsibility. So, lahat tayo sama-sama para ma-achieve natin yung gender equality and women's empowerment. And as mentioned, God is a journey, and this is just the beginning. Maraming in the steps natin sa journey na ito, maraming challenges at marami ring masasayang encounter natin. But we need really to enjoy our journey in gender and development. So you can download. That concludes our synthesis, and you can now download a copy of in today's presentation through the link that appears in your screen. Maybe we could also type in the link so that all the participants online, whether it's in Facebook or dito sa Zoom, they would be able to access it. So, pwede po ninyo tong picturean para i-type nyo po yung sa browser ninyo para ma-download. Uh, Now, I'm tasked to read the closing message of our director. Masiglang hapon sa ating lahat. On behalf of Deputy Executive Director of the Philippine Commission on Women, Ms. Cecil B. Gutierrez, allow me to read her message. I think after such an insightful learning sessions with our resource person, each one of you must be seriously reflecting on how you can further contribute to the gender mainstreaming efforts of your respective institutions. Of course, we are all know that the 4-hour session is not enough to cover all the full spectrum of the God-related mandates and learn about gender mainstreaming as a strategy towards gender-responsive governance. But it is inspiring to note that we have already started the journey and we intend to sustain this through the series of more exciting and fun-filled learning sessions on God.